Back, Tim.
Back.
Cam Meekins show. Live in studio. With my guy, Tim Larew. What's going on, man?
What's up, Cam?
Glad to have you in person, man.
It feels good, man. It feels good to be sitting in here.
So we did one, what was that, like 4 or 5 months ago?
Yeah.
In the heat of the pandemic?
Yeah, I just moved into my new spot, so it was probably like April-ish.
And we got the wine going, too, in a
I'm
few.
excited to crack that.
Yeah.
I just came off a wine weekend.
Yeah, how was that, man? You were up in
sick.
Napa Valley?
Yeah.
For your birthday?
That region, yeah, we stayed like 45 minutes west of Napa, but in an area where there's still just like hundreds of wineries every block. It's crazy. Super relaxing, off the grid. It was a good way to spend my birthday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was up with this Airbnb you were at?
The Airbnb was crazy. It was, basically I told you a little bit, but I was trying to find a place where I could just relax. My birthday, I always just get in my head and, I'm like, I think I've done a proper party like once in the last 15 years. I just like to kind of
Well, because you had something right before the pandemic, right?
The party?
You had a party.
Yeah, Joe Johnson and I
Right.
did like a little collab get together at what was it, Saddle Ranch?
Yeah. Before TikTok took it over.
Yeah. But yeah, so I was just looking, different resorts. I didn't want to fly because I'd just flown. I'm flying again in a month, so wanted to do something within some sort of driving distance, and was just looking at like every, hotel, Airbnb, anything that looked like it was either in the woods or like, crazy water view. I just wanted something where I could like fucking, gaze into nowhere and think. So I ended up finding this Airbnb. The listing said famous cartoonist studio, and the vibe was crazy. It looked right. They were pretty discreet about it, but did some digging, and it turns out that it was Charles Schulz who created Peanuts, Charlie Brown, Snoopy, that whole comic strip. He would work there in the 60s and 70s. Like, he built this whole property. His main house was close by on this like 100-acre lot, and then this studio was this 1-bedroom. Just beautiful. It's hard to describe, but it's basically within, just redwoods everywhere. You can't see or hear anyone. It's like 15 minutes off the main road. He built 4 golf holes on the property, like kind of surrounding the perimeter of the house, because he was an avid golfer, and in between like working on this comic strip, he would go out and hit balls. So it was kind of the best of both worlds for me. It was like, off the grid, wine country. I'd never been there. And I got to hit a few golf balls. So it was a nice
Do you
week.
feel like you really fucking had a moment there where you were kind of feeling like off the grid? Did you kind of go off your phone a little bit?
A little bit, yeah. I definitely like, I set an away message on my email, which is rare for me.
Out of office?
Yeah, an out of office, exactly. Shit, yeah. But, tried to stay off. But it was, what was crazy is the AstroWorld disaster happened on my birthday. So,
damn, yeah.
I'm like trying to, keep off Twitter, but something that big and something that affects people that, directly in the business, it's hard to tune out. That's something that's, sadly like a, once in a lifetime, once in a decade kind of situation. So that was the one thing where I just kind of kept getting pulled back to like, well, let me like at least kind of see how this is unfolding.
Yeah.
But, as far as like my day-to-day work, I definitely, gave myself a few days to, to relax and get away from it. Yeah.
Yeah. How do you feel about, from the looking at it as an artist manager, there's so many implications I feel like to come from this AstroWorld shit. There's a lot. Yeah. There's a lot there.
Yeah.
And we can get there, but what do you?
A lot.
What was your initial kind of feeling when you got the news?
Well, my initial reaction was, nothing even close to what they experienced, but I immediately had the flashback to 2011 in Boston, seeing Odd Future. I had seen them once already. Mm-hmm. Saw them a second time. It was at Royale in Boston, like kind of the common area for anybody that doesn't know. And, I was only 2 years into going to shows at that point. I'd go to a lot of shows alone. I'd find a random friend. I just kind of got caught up in this, you know, this passion for just seeing live music. When I grew up, I hadn't gone to any shows. I went to my first show ever when I was a freshman in college. So here I am, a sophomore in college. Odd Future was known for those kind of shows. You know, they were like very different, but they were like the rage type of rap show before Travis. You know, that was 4 years before Travis. And this was like a 600-700 capacity venue. That's why I say 50,000 people versus 700. You can't compare.
Right.
But I was right up by the front, you know, and I was excited and ready to be bumped around. But even that night, what I experienced, like I fell, a bunch of people fell. Like I had to like yank my leg out from under somebody. And I remember I can still feel that feeling, like my heart racing, just being like, yo, like.
Just the panic.
Yeah, and I'm not a big guy. So, you know, at that point, I'm like, yo, if a few people fall on me, I'm fucked. So that was my, you know, immediate, like, visceral, oh, God, like, I know that feeling. And I know the feeling of claustrophobia because I have a little bit of that. And I think some of it stems from that, just that feeling of, like, I might not be able to get out of this, you know, and people are so packed. So when you 50 to 75x that, and you think about what that must have been like for those kids, you know, not just the 8 to 10 that passed, you know, and the 300 that got injured, but, you know, there were thousands, tens of thousands others that probably felt some level even more that, you know, of what I felt that night, which is a fucking terrible feeling. And to think that there's kids that lost their lives, it's just, you can't even really grapple with. You can't fathom that, you know? So, you know, I just had this immediate response of just like sadness, you know, just like, man, like, you know, and I thought a few times about sharing my opinions on Twitter. I didn't, just because there was so much to grapple with. And I've, you know, as I've gotten older, I've tried to be less I don't like the reactionary culture in general. Like, I think most people with most situations these days just like, you know, aren't giving a whole lot of thought.
They just want to get their fucking 2 cents out there.
Yeah.
And oftentimes want to just start attacking people just to throw shit at the wall and see what sticks.
Yeah. And we've all been there. But, you know, I think the other trend, and we can get into this, you know, especially with like the Dave Chappelle special, there's a really unfortunate trend of people reacting to reactions and not reacting to the source material, and not even taking in the source material, not taking the time to think about, what did I watch? What did I witness? How do I feel about it? They're looking at the outcry and they're saying, well, how does that make me feel? And you're getting a skewed perception of what really happened. So I say that to say, you know, like, you know, I was immediately thinking through, like, you know, what does this mean for the people that were there? Then the next step is like, well, what does this mean for like the music business and the festival business? But it's really complicated and just sad, and there's no silver lining with something like that. There's none. It's just bad. It's just bad for everyone.
Yeah, man.
Sucks.
It's horrible, dude. And to think that, you know, 8 people lost their lives is just like a staggering figure. And it's
staggering.
You've seen, you know, it seems like it's maybe like a once every decade or two kind of thing where something like this will happen, and then it kind of resets the focus on safety, like Woodstock 98 or whatever, when that shit was 99. And then I guess there's this Pearl Jam concert that happened where a similar kind of situation. So these things have happened in the past. And I feel like after Woodstock 99, there was a long time where there wasn't live festivals at that big of a scale where people were like outdoor, like just packed in like so much. Like, I almost kind of feel like if you're an artist who's big enough to have 30,000, 50,000 people come to a show, it's better to do it in a stadium where there's an infrastructure set up to to have that many people in a, you know, functional way, as opposed to trying to put all those people in one giant general admission section. Like, that doesn't seem like well, the best idea.
I'm not super well versed on it, so I'm not gonna. This is not coming from me, but I was just talking to my friend Barry, who, longtime friend of mine, and you know, well-known manager in the business, manages Earth Gang and JID, and works with the whole Dreamville circle. And we were just talking about this right before I walked in here, and he was telling me that for the last 30 years, internationally, there's been a standard where you know, there's larger groups sectioned off, and there's not this like very American festival way of just putting 50,000 people in one barricaded section. Like I said, I haven't experienced that, but he's done a lot of international touring and festivals with his act. So, you know, that was interesting to me. And that I feel like is, you know, the sort of the next logical step is like, well, how do we take 50,000 people that are trying to see Travis Scott and, you know, and group them? So even if there are, you know, responses like that and that kind of inevitable rage, we got to decrease the likelihood that, you know, tens of thousands of people aren't trapped. Right. Because that's, you know, again, I just immediately, I'm like, I know on the smallest of scales, I know what that feels like. So I, you know, these kids are coming out saying, you know, you put your hands up and you couldn't move for an hour and a half. Like, and this one kid, I was watching this news report yesterday, and the reporter was like, when did you know it was different than the average, like, you know, concert where you're getting shoved around and moshed and turned up? And he was like, when I got pushed 70 feet to the right without moving myself, like, you know, because when you get pushed around at a show, you can, I remember seeing a Lil B show downtown, downstairs, Middle East in 2011, and I remember kind of being in the mix, getting pushed, you know, 5 to 10 feet to the right, left, and being like, oh, this is going to be a crazy crowd, but maybe I should get by the side, which I did. 70 feet, you know, and it makes sense because it's 50,000
Well,
people.
It moves like a fucking wave, I guess, at that point.
Yeah, and then when you get, I mean, this isn't even worth talking about, but it's like when it's physics, you know, it's gravity, whatever. When one person slips, it's a literal domino effect. So it's just bad, man. I mean, you know, it's going to be really interesting to see like where the liability lies in this kind of thing, because all the fine print, and Barry and I were talking about this too, there's fine print that when you know, fans are buying tickets to these things, and the bottom of the 9-page thing that no one reads, it says you're waiving that responsibility. Like it's on you. You're taking you're assuming the risk.
And I think with something like that, you waive that liability, but if they can prove like some gross negligence,
that's what it is.
On behalf of either Live Nation or whoever put on the event, or even Travis himself, like then maybe there's an argument to be made there, and that will probably happen.
I mean, and there's no question that there's negligence. You know, it's one of those things that happen in life where it's all good till it isn't. You know.
Well, that's when you said like Odd Future 2011, it actually kind of reminded me. I feel like Travis Scott really started to like, because, you know, I mean, Travis was like doing his thing back in 2011, like writing with Kanye, and like slowly has built this like massive following and has really curated this image.
Oh, yeah.
And I feel like he took a lot of pages from Odd Future, Tyler the Creator, because he was starting to come up along that same time when like 2010, 2011, they created this whole like really aggressive rage hip hop kind of culture.
And to that point, they proved there was a demand for it, because those shows were selling out like crazy.
Exactly. And there's a lot of, you know, fun and excitement in that, because you're letting go and this and that. But, you know, and that's what's so fascinating and like just crazy about this whole situation is like now with this happening, everyone is like so quick to now try and dig stuff up about Travis Scott and say certain things. And man, it's a complex situation, because you know, there's probably some validity to some of that nuance in those conversations about, you know, he has a history of kind of inciting a little bit too much aggression with crowds. Obviously, I personally, as my opinion, don't believe that, you know, he would ever like want it to be just this chaotic, you know, situation. But I think when you're an artist who's become that successful, you're detached from the reality of it. You know what I mean?
You're detached, and, you know, and look, I think there's some level of accountability he has to have, some level. I'm not saying you know, I think there's much larger, you know, places to put that blame. You know, but like the people that, so I'm prefacing this to say I'm not, you know, defending him fully and saying he should be absolved from all, you know, accountability, but, you know, the people that are looking and being like, you saw this in the crowd and didn't stop the show. Do you know what the fuck that feels like? Yeah, like you and I, you know, it's like, you obviously do it for a living. I've DJ'd a handful of shows for you, for Michael Christmas. So I've been on stage, right? Like I know what that feels like. And, you know, and I've been on stage when, you know, some of you guys have played festivals with, you know, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 people in the crowd. So I know what that feels like. And even at that level, even at a 500 capacity show, you or me, we don't necessarily know what's going on in the crowd. And then you, again, bring that to a 50,000, capacity show with, the production he has, the lighting, like, you can't look at a guy like that and say, how did you not stop the show?
That's what's so annoying.
And he, the truth is, okay, seeing an ambulance, that's a bit of a red flag. Seeing somebody get carried out, which we saw the videos he did, that's a red flag. But like, the sort of defense is like, his shows typically look like that. Like, there's been a lot of situations. Right? There's a lot of situations in a lot of genres, like where you'll see people pass out. I mean, we've been at shows where people are like, on the verge of passing out.
People go to concerts to take drugs too.
That's the thing. Happens. So from his standpoint, he did stop the show a couple of times, and he said, look, somebody's passed out here. So, again, I'm not fully defending him, but he several times was like, something's off here. And the accountability, he could have, sure, hindsight is everything. He could have said, this is getting out of hand. But from his perspective in that situation, I don't know how different it really looked, because there's pockets, there's pockets where people are falling down. But from a stage with that setup, can you see that over a sea of 50,000? Picture the the classic like DMX footage from Woodstock. It's like, do you expect a guy like that to look in that crowd and be like, something's off back there?
Right there. Yeah. I mean, it's so many different things added up at once. There's and I think when you get to the point where this eventually goes legal and there's assessment of liability, I think that's how you look at it. Like, the courts are going to determine like how much Travis Scott is liable versus how much the promotion company is liable versus the Houston police versus like, there's going to be a lot of complex kind of connecting dots as to like what went wrong.
Totally.
And who eventually is like liable to what degree and to what percentage. Even. I think they break it down to like percentage liability when it comes to these type of civil litigation things.
And that was the last thing Barry and I were talking about. I think it's very clearly there's a pie.
Well, and people have known this in the music biz for forever, right? Like, you and I know the music business. Like, when you do touring at a large scale, like you create a separate LLC to deal with your show income, so that if something happens in a live show,
it can happen.
It's separate from your music income, and so things happen, and it's a thing that people are absolutely aware of. But I think at this scale, there's clearly a number of things that went wrong where people are liable in order for this to happen. And I think also, too, it's not a coincidence, in my opinion, that we're coming out of this pandemic and people have been inside for 2 years. And now festivals are starting to happen, few and far between, but they're starting to happen. And people are so eager, especially young people who want to party. Some of them want to do drugs. Some of them go to festivals like this not caring what happens. Their mentality is like, fuck it. It's a dangerous headspace that people are in to begin with, because there's been this like kind of, and I think you and I have talked about this before, this like de-risking that everyone has been doing during the pandemic, like not taking any risk. And now they're on the other side of it a little bit, and they're not just going back to their normal amount of risk, they're taking more risk to almost like make up for lost time. Totally. And this isn't just a theory. This has been like proven with every pandemic for the last like 2,000 years.
And then you combine that with, I can't say this with 100% certainty, but you gather the clues, and it's like, a company like Live Nation or some of these large promotion companies, they're obviously trying to maximize profit to make up for the massive profit they lost. So you combine this like de-risking youth, like just, I don't give a fuck, like I'm just gonna go out here and throw my body around and maybe take some drugs or whatever because I've been cooped up for a year. You combine that with companies and corporations that are like, look, like if we got to cut corners to start chipping away at this this money we lost out on, they're probably going to do that because we know that's how corporations work here. Right. So that's just a bad recipe combined with Travis's history for like even all the promo material for the festival showed people breaking down barricades. Like, again, it's all good till it isn't, right? Like in hindsight, you can look at that and be like, well, nothing bad ever really happened, so why wouldn't he? That's his brand. That's his whole thing, is like, he's the rager. But again, you combine it with all these different factors, and you're like, oh, that looks pretty bad.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the lessons from this situation. I'm sure Travis probably feels horrible about that, because I feel like he just never would have expected anything like that to happen. And so, it's all fun and games till it isn't. You're right.
Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, man.
It's tough, man. But yeah, to close it out, just, I'm thinking about and praying for everybody involved, like, not just the kids who lost their lives and their families, but just everyone, everyone that'll have some kind of trauma, and even just people in the music business and artists and stuff that, will affect everyone to some degree. But man, like,
yeah,
tough
totally,
situation.
man. No, you and me both. Definitely thinking of everybody. But the other thing that's kind of stuck out to me in this last few days since this has happened is that, like, it's kind of pointed out where we are in this country, where, like, nothing is safe from going down this, like, political polarization road of like, this tragic event now has become this thing where I think people are like, from the media standpoint, people are trying to, like, paint this narrative that's not really true. It's disingenuous of this whole Travis Scott thing, and his whole, like, aura of being a little bit too aggressive and this and that. And there's truth to that for sure, but they're really trying to push that narrative because it makes a juicier, more fucked up story. Yeah. And I hate that shit, man.
Well,
like,
me too, man. I mean, it comes down to, like, opportunists, and it's like, when people can present something in a non-biased way, or for the point of, look, like, we're sharing news, we're sharing the facts, but when there is a very clear agenda at play with anything, that's when, to me, clearly, you two, to a lot of people, it's just like, man, like, it's, one of my, like, main life philosophies is, I generally think with everything we do, you're either building or you're destroying. That's how I live my life. I consider myself a builder. I consider myself someone that adds. We all slip up sometimes, but there are definitely people, entities, companies that are out to destroy. And a lot of media companies these days are out to destroy. Yeah. They're not here to add anything positive to civilization or, help people. They're out here to say, well, if something's going to get eyeballs, it doesn't matter who gets hurt by this. We're blasting it. And that's destruction. That's not building. That's not adding.
Well, and too, like with what you were saying earlier about how people just consume these little snippets now, and they don't get the full deep dive. They just go off the snippets that they see, whether it's on TikTok or Twitter trends or whatever, and then they form their opinion based off of the, the quick little blurb of what the whole thing is. And man, it's just frustrating. Like, why can't we just have a real conversation about shit when it happens and stop trying to make it this, like, bigger thing than it is? You want to drink some wine?
I would love to. I took a 2-day break from wine. I'm ready to get back to it.
Yeah, you didn't have enough when you were in Northern
I actually had a little bit last night. I did have a little bit last night and the night before. So I've actually drinking wine for about 6 days straight. So we'll keep it going.
Well, let's make it a week.
I had some good wine.
What was your favorite experience, from a wine standpoint? You went to a couple wineries?
Just to two. Yeah, it was funny. We were supposed to go to this other one initially, and I put in the little note when I bought the tickets for that time. I said, they said any disabilities, and I just threw in my allergies there. I was like, I'm allergic to milk and all nuts. Not thinking anything of it. I'm more thinking, hey, maybe if there's a cheese pairing, they'll leave the cheese out of my situation. And, I'm running 5 minutes late, and I call the winery and I say, hey, I'll be there in 5 minutes. Sorry. And she says, oh, I did notice you said you're allergic to milk, and, like, we do process our wines with milk. So maybe you shouldn't do the tasting here. And I'm 5 minutes from this winery, right?
They process the wines.
I know,
with
and
milk?
I've never heard that. I've heard egg. I've heard some type of fish, and that's even just in, like, the refining process. That's not like an actual ingredient in the wine, but so of course that's a huge red flag. And I was just kind of on some, like, are you sure shit? And she was like 100%, so that was a risk I was not willing to take. Right. So found another one in we didn't do a tasting. We just went to this winery and got a bottle and drank it outside, which was nice. And then we went to the second actual tasting, which was at that castle that I think I showed you pictures of.
Did you find out at all, like, what the fuck they're doing with milk and wine?
No, I mean, unfortunately, these people aren't well versed in food allergies, so
right.
They're not going to be able to answer that question.
How is it?
Oh yeah, that is nice.
Some real ASMR here on the podcast. Put this back in here.
I was thinking that I bought this like little aerator pourer the other day from the castle. It was like this night, very castle themed, and I was pouring and I sent somebody a video of it. And as I was watching the video back, I'm like, this sounds really pleasant. Just this, this like very quiet pour from this little.
Are you into ASMR stuff at all?
No, but I can appreciate it. I never really watched it like that, but
yeah, no, I mean, it's definitely an interesting point on where we're at in society. I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, between that and moan rooms on Clubhouse.
What is that?
You never got into that world?
No.
Well, I didn't get into that world.
I was in the Clubhouse world for about 2 days, and then I was like, "This is like, I don't think this is an app that's needed on this earth." Frankly.
What's crazy is they're doubling down. I mean, I see a lot of people that I've known for a long time that are getting hired in different sectors.
Oh, I'm sure.
Different positions. It will be interesting to see where it goes. I think the hype definitely died down, and I mean, had died down heavily. I was on it for about 2 weeks, end of last year, fall or whatever, where it felt interesting and sort of productive, and it hadn't really been unveiled to the public yet. So it was this like, I would find myself in rooms with like our friend Shiv and It's the Real and my friend Amir, and it would just be these people that I hadn't caught up with in a while. Everyone was home all of last year, so it was this like, I think it kind of filled this like social void for a second. But then when people started getting back out in real life and, and then it got just over flooded with like misinformation, just like is everywhere right now. I think people started to be like, oh, this isn't like a source of education or good conversation. It's just like people yelling over each other.
Is that what's happening? A lot of like rabbit holes are going down.
I haven't been on it since January or last December. I don't know. It's been a long time, but, but the moan rooms, it was people, I don't know who the hell started it, but it was rooms where you would have men and women both getting on stage in Clubhouse and doing like sexual moans to win money. And it was like $500, $300, $100.
Who's paying the money?
I don't fucking know. That's why I was like, I didn't even step foot, digitally speaking, into those rooms, but I saw it and people would like, put clips of them on Twitter. I remember there was, I won't say his name, but a friend of mine got like exposed because his Avi he wasn't doing the moaning, but he was one of the viewers in the moan room.
Man.
And he made a joke of it, but I was on Twitter. It's like, yo, why is so-and-so like in this room right now? Just like listening to people moan. So it was funny, but yeah, somebody was paying people out or at least allegedly paying people out for fucking moaning on an app.
That's wild, man.
I don't know. Those were dark days.
Yeah, I think there definitely was a lot of opportunity that came out of the fact that we were all stuck inside that doesn't really, it's probably not going to stick around now that we're kind of getting a little bit back into, there's some stuff that is definitely a part of our,
we'll see, man,
our society.
We'll see. I mean, with the whole Web3 movement, it's like, there's just, I think people are going to be split between like diving deeper into this new version of the internet, new version of like social apps, and wanting to detach from. I find myself right in the middle. I'm like, I kind of see upside to the development of like what all of this looks like, but I'm also like, man, I'd love to just go to the woods like fucking Charles Schultz did and write.
Do you think that a lot of people will do that, or do you think it's like a very small percentage of people who are going to detach?
Yeah, I think it's a very small percentage. I don't think it's realistic.
Yeah,
I'm not going to detach.
Right.
I would like to in theory, but it's not going to happen.
Yeah, but I guess I could see a scenario where there's just a little bit more of a balance between the digital and the analog world.
Yeah.
But yeah, what do you think about this whole concept of like the metaverse and, NFTs and virtual reality and where all this shit is going?
I'm trying to grapple with it. I'm doing a lot of reading, a lot of listening to podcasts, a lot of, I think just even my career, I have to try to stay up on that at the very least. I have to try to have an understanding of where is this entertainment, internet, digital based industry going. So, and I'm genuinely curious, but I'm definitely not one of the, for better or worse, I'm not one of the earliest adapters being like, okay, let me, buy a, Bored Ape and change my Avi to it and like be a committed player in this world right now. I know it's even like the, the Bored Apes and some of those like CryptoPunks and stuff. It's like anything. It's a social symbol, so it's people with a ton of money, ton of status saying, I'm a part of this exclusive club, and like, you can't afford this ape that is my avatar.
Yeah.
I don't know where that's gonna go. I don't know if that's.
Well, people love to create class systems and social status symbols, right? And so there's probably going to continue to be a market for at least some of that stuff.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's interesting just because, I think one of the big sells of like music NFTs is like, it's the creator economy, and this is giving artists an opportunity to like crowdfund, and go directly to the consumer. But at the same time, you get a lot of the consumers right now. They're really just people that are in that world already, and they're just
passionate about that type of stuff.
They're acquiring assets in the same way like Sony is acquiring assets. It's different, it's different. And I do see the huge upside, but like we'll see like when the market at large adapts that. Like when did just music fans start buying NFTs? Right now, it seems like it's majority like NFT people, whatever. We'll see, but I'm definitely doing my diligence and researching and staying committed to try and understand where things are headed.
Anytime there's like a big push toward this new thing, there's going to be hundreds or thousands of examples of like new businesses, new opportunities, and I think that's what's going on with the NFTs and all this other stuff right now. And some of those are going to end up being winners. Most of them are going to end up being losers.
Yeah.
But this excitement around this direction that it's going is just creating tremendous opportunity. And eventually that bubble will burst, and the real things that actually add value are going to stick around. And it'll be interesting to see what those things are. But I think it seems to be past the point of no return when Facebook and all these like big interests are basically all in on this concept now.
Yeah, that's what's happening.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel a little bit like behind on my understanding of it.
I think it would really be a week or 2 weeks of diving in and trying to learn. I don't think it's far enough that like you or anyone is like too behind or way behind.
Yeah.
It's just like,
because a lot of it's just conceptual right now in terms of the potential for some of this stuff.
Sure.
But the actual tangible things that are happening right now is like you can use cryptocurrency to buy a picture of a weird like pixelated.
And there's starting to be events and meetups and like, again, like social clout tokens, you know, like they're starting to be like the physical manifestations of, purchasing these digital assets. They're starting to be that. But again, like, I'm not well versed enough to even speak on this shit confidently yet.
Yeah.
But I'm absolutely peeping kind of what's going on and
no, it's really interesting for sure. I'm having Cena from Pink Dolphin on the podcast next week.
Oh, sick.
And
that'll be interesting.
They just dropped an NFT project, and it's like, I mean, it seems like it's killing it. And that's the one thing that's really fascinating to me is like the entrepreneurial side of being able to create like 5,000 of these unique characteristic NFTs.
Yep.
And there's a lot that goes into that I don't fully understand, but that's cool because you can design. There's like a creative element to it. There's a business element to it. It's it's a cool thing that's going on for sure.
Well, I saw one of I think Sam Spratt. I think it's who it was. He did a lot of like Logic's art. Cover arts and
like all those kind of sketches and shit.
The really nicely done like drawings, and he put out a project with like 3 different pieces. I think he made something like $250,000 for 3 pieces, or
that's
the equivalent
crazy.
in ETH. But and the art was really, really nice, and it seemed very thoughtful, and it seemed like there was a real kind of narrative to it.
Right.
And from not I haven't done the craziest deep dive, but from what I've observed so far, it seems like the more you're committed to like depth and like being a part of that community versus trying to do a little quick cash grab.
Right.
The it's like anything. The more success you have is like how well you understand and how committed you are to like that space, and not just saying, oh, let me just, put an MP3 online and just throw up a random cover art. It's like it's just like fine art, it's like people have respect when they know how seriously you take
person really cares about it.
So that's what I saw with his project. I'm like, this dude really put together something that it just cuts through like visually. It just looks better than a lot of stuff that's out. And it also seemed like there was a clear narrative, and people have watched his journey as an artist, over the last 5, 6, 10 years, whatever, and have seen the kind of stop and go and the struggles of an artist. So when there's an opportunity to kind of like crowdsource something, it doesn't come off as a cash grab. It comes off of, this is a door that someone like him had been waiting for years, and had to only do like commissioned art for artists in the past, and now it's like he's able to build his own marketplace.
Totally. There's definitely a renaissance period going on with all types of art and digital media and creativity, and people moving from working for a big corporation to figuring out how to monetize themselves for $75,000 a year, and that's cool. There's probably 1,000 times more ways to make $75,000 a year today than there was 20 years ago.
Oh God, yeah.
And that's cool.
That is cool. That's
and that has serious implications for where we're going in the world.
Yeah, that's important.
And I just think that, don't we all want to live in a society where we're a little bit more focused on like the arts and these type of things? Like,
yeah.
Do we need to be just a fucking input-output world where it's like all about what we're producing? And why can't we produce like cool shit that we enjoy?
Well, because they don't want us to.
Right.
Like that's a bigger picture thing. But yeah, I mean, the world, I've always, we're part of it, but like the creator world is super fucking important.
Yeah.
It just is. It's like that's what makes the world go around, like the music, the films, the art, like.
Yeah. And it's cool that all that stuff is just getting a little bit democratized. Music was the first one to really go through that change 10, 15 years ago. And now I think we're seeing that happen in the fine art world. Yeah. For sure.
And even in, films, feature length, it's like, we're seeing for the first time, like, Netflix originals get nominated for Academy Awards, and kind of people of the old guard being like, that's not right, like if your movie isn't in theaters. But it's like, man, fuck that.
Let's
level the playing field. It's like it's a theater's a distribution channel. Netflix is a distribution channel.
Well, what's fascinating is how quickly some of these companies that used to be the young hip disruptor just become just like the major conglomerates that were the old guard. And Netflix is a major conglomerate now. Like,
oh yeah,
it's and so that's another component to it all is that very quickly a company like even like fucking Facebook, like there was a period in time where Facebook was this cool young tech company, and now Facebook is considered probably like more evil than fucking Monsanto, and like probably considered the most evil corporation in the world.
I mean, it's hugely responsible for the misinformation crisis.
No, facts.
And I remember even, it's like our, millennial, like, but specifically like where you and I sit between 25 and 35, I think it's really interesting because we were old enough, before social media, before the internet, before YouTube, we lived that. We lived through like the dial up, like one internet connection in a household, like somebody's on the phone, you can't, get on the internet. Like we lived through that. We lived through, I was texting when I was in 8th, 9th grade, like just starting to, but it was like you only texted on some like, just plans shit.
Right.
You weren't texting.
T9 word.
Yeah, you weren't texting to converse. You weren't texting to have converse. You couldn't send photos. You couldn't. I remember like watching a Friends episode when I was a kid, seeing this like futuristic sort of like FaceTime thing, being like that will never happen, and it's like now I can FaceTime somebody in Australia right now, like it's just, there's so much. But what my point was Twitter. I remember sitting in, I got my Twitter in summer 2009, and I was like early-ish, like Twitter had been around for a couple of years, but I was probably in the 10th percentile in my friend group that had it, 90% didn't. And I remember my freshman year in college, which was fall 2009, sitting in my communications 101 lecture, 400 people. And, the professor, the lecturer saying, how many people in here have a Twitter account? And I was one of 400 people in the room. I was probably one of 60 people in there that had a Twitter. And then she said, how many people think it's going to be around in 5 years? I was one of probably 20 people out of 400. that said it's going to be around in 5 years. Because at the time, it was still kind of using the Facebook status model of like, so-and-so is doing this. It was just, there were so many people being like, what is the point, you know? But it's become the most reliable search engine that exists. I don't go to Google. If it's something historical, I go to Google. But if it's something in real time, I go to Twitter every single time because it's immediate updates. And, you know, the upside of that is the real-time updates. The downside is there's no checks and balances. There's no filtration system. It's like misinformation is just as present there as anywhere. So it's tricky, but, you know, it's just all of this it's just our life. There isn't like a digital world, and it's just it's just all kind of grouped in together now. It's real life.
Yeah, it's, you know, and it's like it goes both ways, man, because now we can also spread correct information faster than ever too.
100%.
You know, and I imagine that in a world before Twitter, this was just more like geographically centered in terms of like, all right, let's say something starts getting circulated between people, that's, you know, some conspiracy theory, and then it goes from here to here to here. You know, these things have probably happened forever, but they just kind of spread in a slower, different way. Now it catches like a wildfire and just, you know, can go across the entire internet, and 30% of people believe it as fact. But you can counter that too across the whole swath of the internet. So yeah, it's I think about like just the implications on both sides of it all the time, because it's just so complex. There's no good way to sum it all up.
No.
This is just where we are now.
Yeah.
This is the world we live in, and there's a lot of people that are just kind of, you know, stuck in these rabbit holes of the internet.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people that aren't either. And, you know, very interesting to see where it's going to lead to. And if it's going to reach an inflection point where, you know, something big happens that's like some historic moment, or if it just kind of fizzles out.
What do you mean? It just happened. The fucking pandemic.
Well, yeah, for sure, the pandemic. But that was like a natural, you know, pathogen type of thing. I'm talking about like a civil war.
Okay.
You know?
I was thinking about it just through the lens of the reaction, you know, like just the misinformation, the information, the divisiveness, and how, you know, you're on this platform and it's like you just, unfortunately, like when people are left to their own devices, most people are not going to critically think. Most people are not going to research. Most people are going to say whatever their mom, sister, brother, friend, cousin, dad are saying.
Yeah.
Like, that's just the reality.
Totally.
So, you know, when these major events happen, you're seeing it all, and you're seeing a hell of a lot of, like, again, it's reactions to reactions, or it's reactions to, you know, what your friend said. And it's really hard, you know, but like in my own way, I've tried really hard, you know, the last, especially couple years, to really think critically about things and really do my own research. And, you know, I've slipped up, you know, I've slipped up, and I've shared reactionary things that I didn't give super deep thought to. And, you know, we all do it sometimes, but I do my best to, you know, take in and then filter my own way, do my research, and come up with my own version of, well, not just version, but like what the truth really is, or what really happened, or at least what my opinion on it is.
Right.
It's hard, but
yeah, it's tough now, because even the trusted sources now are playing the game.
It's all changing.
You know, I think there was a point in time where there really were trusted sources out there that were just doing good journalism to do it, but that's very limited now. And I think that, you know, the pandemic kind of exemplifies that. Like, there's just so much nuance in all this stuff, but there's a certain narrative that the government and, you know, big media corporations want to push. Yeah. You know, the government has their own interests. Media companies have profits as, you know, as their focus. And this notion of like polarization and people fighting against each other is really good for media companies, because it gives people something to talk about. And, you know,
well, that's why Facebook did what they did, and they, you know, they drove up all of the divisive stuff, you know, and all of the Trump shit and everything, because that was the consumer base. It's what they wanted. They wanted to argue. You know, it's like, that's what I look at. Like, I don't use Facebook anymore. I check it every once in a while.
Yeah.
But I don't use it. I haven't posted on there since I was in, I don't know, college maybe. Like, it's been a long time, been 7-8 years. You know, but I look back and some of my friends and peers from high school are very, very, very actively, probably you the same, using Facebook every day, and they argue with each other all day. And it's just these, like, I can't even call it political because it's like beneath that, but it's just like these debates where they just, you know, people are living very boring lives. A lot of people, that's the reality. So they go online and they just can't wait to, you know, comment on a friend they knew 10 years ago and what they, you know, are talking about when it comes to Kamala Harris or coming to Fauci or coming to, they just can't fucking wait.
Yeah.
For no reason. Like, there's nothing anyone gains from that, you know, but like, it's just the place where that type of shit is propped up at the top of your timeline, you know, and like stuff that's controversial is put in front of you. This is not anything anyone doesn't know, but it's like, it's interesting.
Well, and it's great for Facebook too, because I feel like Facebook was becoming this kind of irrelevant platform.
It was becoming the things
over to Instagram.
It was becoming the place your parents and your aunts and uncles.
And now it's kind of made this resurgence as this like open forum where people can have these ridiculous fucking debates about controversial conspiracy theory issues, and they're like, oh, that's a good road for us to go down. You know, can squeeze a little bit of profit out of these people and sell their data, and so you know that's all they're looking at. The users are not the customers; they're the product.
100%. Yeah, the data, everything.
Yeah, man. But it's, you know, it's just so hard to know what's true unless you really do a deep dive into like all of the data on these various issues. Like with the pandemic, for example, like there's so much misinformation out there on both sides. I think there's more dangerous information out there on the like anti-vaxxer, 100%. The pandemic isn't a big deal side. Like that's a really dangerous thing. But there's also misinformation on the, you know, scientific side because they're doing it from a standpoint of we just want to get this very clean narrative out there that's like get vaccinated and let's, you know, they're trying to do the right thing at the end of the day. They're trying to solve the problem.
Lack of nuance is like a huge fucking problem.
That's what it is exactly what I'm saying.
So many
like, why can't we just talk about it for real? Like, what's the real story about the data on the vaccine? Don't tell me that it's 98% effective. It's not. You know, let's talk about the real nuance there. We can handle it. Some of us can handle that discussion, and I think that's what we don't get from that side, you know? So.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think we give people in general enough credit to, and a lot of people don't listen, right? But it's like, I think, you know, we got to at least give people the chance to take in information, you know, and see both sides, for lack of a better term.
Right.
Like, you got to present the information. Even back when, like, you know, I understand how we got there, but I remember having a gripe early with, you know, March or April 2020. I understood why it happened because they were trying to, you know, hold on to as much PPE as possible for hospital workers. But, you know, when someone like Fauci, who people can't wait to attack, comes out and says, you don't need to wear a mask, verbatim, that's a fucking problem. And I get why. It's because they didn't want to have a mass rush on masks, and that leads to a much larger problem. Similar, there's a parallel that we were talking about earlier with the festivals. It's so deep rooted, right? It's like, I understand that's what he did and they did as sort of a band-aid to that problem. It was like, we're not going to have enough masks, so our choice is either to tell people you need a mask because this is an airborne illness, or we tell people they're okay so that we can hold on to that for people that are going to be treated for that illness. But it's a catch-22 because more people are going to get illness when you tell them not to wear a mask. So I understand. So the deep-rooted issue is, why the fuck wasn't there PPE in production? We knew about this virus. My mom was sending me emails about this shit in mid-January. So how is leadership of a country, you know, not producing? I don't know enough about the supply chain or anything, but how are you not getting a 3-month? And we sort of know, look what the leadership was, you know, look who it was. But how did we get there? And that's the nuance that needs to be talked about for the future.
Right.
Because we can't fucking change the past. We can't change this disastrous festival situation. We can't change this disastrous, catastrophic pandemic. We can't change what happened, but we need to be able to inform people what the truth is, so we can say, look, collectively, even on a local level, like, what can we do to protect ourselves more? with situations like this. And doing the Band-Aid shit doesn't help, because then you just put a target on your back, you know, and then for years people are going to be like, but you said not to wear masks. And you know what? They're not fucking wrong. I don't like, because that's equally, you know, as little nuance as the problem itself.
Yeah, right. It's just taking one little thing.
Yeah, but it's still like someone's got to break that cycle.
Yeah.
Someone has to, and it's complex. But
I think, you know, why did, you know, Hitler get the opportunity to come into power and get support of Germany in the 1930s? Because the Great Depression happened and people were so economically disenfranchised that they were looking for any solution that would have given them a sliver of a better opportunity in life, right? And this guy was giving you a finger to point the blame at. And so when we're in a tougher economic spot as a society, we're more likely to go toward these extremes. And so I think if we can turn the corner and maybe be in a better economic spot moving forward in the next 5-10 years, we may be able to kind of smooth over some of these edges and get away from this extreme thinking. I mean, we're not in a 1930s Nazi Germany scenario, but the point is very important, that like when we're going through changes economically, and I think this all kind of started out of like the 2008 financial crisis, and then into this like next phase of, you know, the 2010s decade. Where are we going to be at on the other side of that? You know, are we going to be in this new economy where there is more focus on creative and service-based economy, and everybody's got a lot more opportunity, so you're making a little bit more money, so you're less inclined to feel like you need to have this extreme ideology and go down these rabbit holes? I could see that happening. I could also see us going the other direction, which is like just a shit show, and who knows what's going to happen. But I come back to those historical examples of like, why do people think the way they do in moments in time? There's a reason for it, right? Just like there's a reason why, you know, something like this AstroWorld thing can happen when you combine all these different variables. It's important to understand like why things happen, where they come from.
Right. Totally.
You know?
And there's accidents, right? There's a big difference between, you know, an accident and a catastrophe that could have been at least limited. You know, there's a difference. People are going to die at large events going forward. It should be as limited as possible, and it shouldn't happen, but it's gonna happen. You know, I'm talking a one-off here and there. That's going to happen. That's an accident. Yeah. You know, but when you look at the variables of something with that situation, you can't say that's an accident. Oh, you know, prayers for the fam. That's not okay, because there's variables that are controllable. That's the difference. When things aren't controllable, that's an accident. But when things are controllable, then that's at best, that's a lesson. You know, like that's something you have to say in the future. Same thing goes with the pandemic. You have to be able to say, how do we set ourselves up so that there's not this level of a global health crisis? How?
And you got to look toward history to inform yourself and help you make a decision. If you're the board of directors at Live Nation and you know you've just gone off 2 years of not having big live events, you should understand the climate that you're in.
Totally.
And understand that people are going to be coming back without the experience of having gone to live shows and being safe. And, you know, there's more of a chance for things to go wrong because of the dynamic that we're in coming out of the pandemic and the historical examples that are out there where people, you know, mentally are in a different place coming out of the pandemic. You have to know that if you're a Live Nation. Or if you don't care, you just have an insurance policy to cover that type of stuff, and it's just a calculated financial risk you're taking. And sadly, I think they're probably looking at it from that standpoint.
I'm sure.
Is that they don't really care about looking toward history and thinking about doing the right thing. They're just looking at how much.
Well, because that means work and that means money.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, but you know, I mean, with the not, you know, telling people not to wear masks thing, that's another big thing that I think different entities are using as a strategy, which is that like, if you want to make a certain point, you say there's no data to tell us that this is a good thing. But then you pull that back a step further and you say, okay, well, who's controlling doing these studies and getting the data on this stuff? And there's another layer there where you can purposely not do studies on the effectiveness of PPE if at the time you need this narrative of we don't have enough PPE for the whole entire country, so we're going to say there's no data on it because we haven't done the studies, because we're not funding the studies right now because we don't want to know the answer.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And that's happening with a lot of stuff with what's going on.
100%. Yeah.
So, yeah, man, it's complex.
Yeah.
For sure. What else is going on?
Well, I mean, a lot, you know, but we can definitely shift gears. I was going to bring this up because I was actually doing my weekly notifications check on Facebook, which these days is just birthdays and memories, right? But I thought this was interesting because I was driving here, and on this day, 9 years ago, November 10th, 2012, Lamp City family video shoot.
Oh, wow.
Which was a very memorable day.
Facts.
For all of us and the crew. And then 1 year prior, my status was just got my first press request to cover a show for The Fresh Air, which was the name of my old blog. Damn, that's cool. So, you know.
So that's the one good thing about Facebook.
Right. So, you know, I was looking back and kind of reminiscing on the drive here, both of those things. And I was like, damn, what a fun era, you know, to kind of, you know, start what I did just out of the blue, kind of out of boredom and just passion, and, you know, be like super excited to just get a request in 10 years ago, you know, to cover a random show, and then a year later to start working with you and having that video shoot. And, you know, I don't think sometimes about how quickly everything accelerated, but when you look at that, you know, like, I'm like, well, you know, November 2020 to November 2021. But when you look back at like, oh, all the shit that happened between that 1 year and then the year after, that was just a fun little like, you know, reflection, memory. Like that was a fun time, man.
Dude, 100%. No, I completely agree. Man, the Lamp City fam music video.
I mean, just let's look at some of the people in this video. We got Mapa, Blair, Jeff Replay, O Beats, me, you, Domos, Stizz, Nick Gray, like, you know, Curtis Linden, Major Look Boston.
Yep.
Goodwin, of course.
My guy Colin, the skater, in that.
Collins in the front.
Yep.
Zach Correa, my Ben Arnold, my two guys from BU. This was a crew. We had Avenue pull up. I remember he made a cameo.
So during the day, we shot a bunch of like outdoor stuff.
Yeah.
Which is that picture that you're looking at right now. And then was it that night we ended up throwing a party at some suite at a hotel that your friend worked at?
It had to be. I might, you know, maybe I'll get that Facebook memory tomorrow. So we'll find out if it was, you know, 10 years ago or 9 years ago today or tomorrow, whatever. But it was that. It might have been that night. I think it was.
Yeah. But it sounds right. It was sometime around then for sure. But you were like, yeah, you know, we can get this hotel. We can film in the hotel. And then I think we ended up just having like 50 people pull up and just have a straight party.
It was a blast. It was also turned into the worst I ever felt as a friend.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm very grateful that Guillermo, who's still one of my best friends to this day, he accepted my apology. And you know, if he had cut me off forever, I would have understood.
Yeah, but, shout out to Guillermo one time.
Yeah, he's the fucking guy.
We just didn't understand the implications at that point.
No,
when
you're
all
young, having fun, man. I mean, you know, when you get a major label paying, you know, for a suite for a night and for a bunch of alcohol, and you know, for the Celtics game we went to, like we were just living, you know, and then you were younger than me, you know, but like all of us were in college or younger, you know, so
I was like 19 years old.
Not like high school, but like it was. You know, we were all young, so to be able to have that opportunity just to like let loose and have a blast, you know, it definitely got a little out of hand. Luckily, not too out of hand, but I did, you know, have to answer to the cops at like 4 a.m.
Yep.
Which was not fun.
Yep.
But you know, it is what it is, and you know, I apologized to G, and we kept it moving.
Listen, man, that's what life is about, though. It's just having some experiences.
Yeah, you know, it's a little thing called the game card.
You got to just charge it to the game card sometimes. So how do you make sense of this aspect of, you know, kind of going back to 2012, you're starting your career, basically just building relationships and taking advantage of opportunities as they come and turning it into this thing. And I'm sure at the time you had this vision as to like what you thought that would look like for you.
Yeah.
And everybody in the world, in their career, I think at some point has an idea of where they're going to go, and then the reality of where you end up going based off of life.
Yeah.
How do you now, 10 years in the future from that moment, look back and make sense of all that stuff. Because that's something I've been thinking about a lot recently is like, you know, you think you're going to go one direction in your life, and then circumstances that you can't control happen, and it changes, and then you end up here, and you're happier that you're at this place in present time, usually. I mean, personally, that's my kind of take on it is that, like, you never know where you're going to end up, and I'm glad that all these random things happened that led me to where I am today, but it's certainly not the position I thought I was going to be in 10 years ago doing what I'm doing.
I think, I don't want to say majority, but I think you know, a really good percentage of people would agree with that. You know, I think there's some people that you know, have their lives planned out and they follow it step by step and they get where they wanted to go or where they thought they were going to go. And maybe it's just the world we're in. Like, most of our peers are like creative, entrepreneurial. I think naturally, like, that journey takes you all over the fucking place versus like, you know, working in finance and marrying at 26. That's a very different life kind of path and trajectory, you know. And there's definitely, I think, the majority of people I grew up with in Connecticut that, you know, I'm 30, you know, at 30 are a couple years into marriage, a couple kids. They work their sort of like local job near where they grew up. No shame in that. It's great. It's all about what the fuck we want to do individually while we're here. But I think there's that kind of style of life where it's like, you know, I'm going to generally do what maybe my parents did or what I grew up around, or, you know, marry my high school sweetheart, you know. And then there's the sort of like, you know, alternate, you know, kind of trajectory, which is like very much what I was living, which was just being really present and like literally like day by day, week by week, month by month, like, what do I want to be doing with my time here on earth? And I don't know. I think, like, you know, I always grew up just with my food allergies. I think I always had this like very real grasp on death from a young age, just knowing that, like, you know, and I never had any like, you know, when I was a baby, but not in my memory, I never had any like real life threatening situation. But I definitely grew up with the knowledge that if I eat something that I'm not supposed to, I could die, period, you know. So, and I don't think a lot of kids grow up with that. Like, I'm talking 5, 6, 7 years old, like, I could die, you know, today. So I've always had this, like, I think it's a good thing, but a real appreciation for just the moment, because nothing is promised. And you know, I remember going to college being like, I don't know what I want to do, but I love sports and I love writing. And Bill Simmons went to BU, and I, you know, read and watch his shit all the time. So I'm going to go in this sort of sports journalism like that. It combines all my interests, you know? And then I didn't like the sort of like journalism classes. I just didn't enjoy it. It was very formal. It was being taught by, like, you know, old writers at the Boston Globe. And it just was this formality to writing where at that time, especially, like, blogging was huge. So I was kind of like, hey, like, my voice is unique and I don't want to write with structure. Like, I just, not what I want to do for a living. I want to write. I still write to this day. But I don't need there to be like a conventional structure to it. That's not what I'm here for.
Right.
You know, but I did sports journalism. I was, you know, I had a radio show, and I was traveling with the basketball team. I was the color commentator for 2 to 3 years, did some play-by-play, but live broadcasting. I went to the NCAA tournament, just had some incredible memories, you know, with some great people that are still friends to this day. Lee Feiner, who you know, and Seth, and, you know, Sandeep, and all these guys that were part of this like sports journalism community that was just fantastic. You know, and then I just kind of on a whim, going to that Odd Future show I mentioned to you earlier, going to Wiz Khalifa show, going to Big Crit, going to all these kind of new fast rising artists that were coming to Boston. I fell in love with that and stumbled into the scene, decided to start a blog. And very quickly it was just like, hey, like, you know, I might have thought my life was headed down this, like, you know, maybe you're a writer for Sports Illustrated, or maybe you're a, you know, a broadcaster, or maybe you're, you know, a, you know, Sports Center anchor. Like, that was sort of the pot of, you know, careers I was headed towards. But, you know, again, it was very kind of present in the moment. Like, what am I enjoying doing most? And I just had this real calling towards this Boston hip hop scene, you know? And I didn't really think, you were asking about like the plans. I didn't have any plans for what that looked like career wise. It was just like, I'm really enjoying my life and I'm contributing to something, kind of what I was saying earlier. Like I was building, I was building, I was helping build. And I've always loved the feeling of helping build communities, build opportunities, build projects, build art. And I was able to do that. And, and that led me to just like, all right, well, I'm building a platform, I'm building opportunities. All right, through those opportunities, people kind of are, gaining energy they didn't have, whether that's someone like you who was from afar being like, oh, there's some like energy growing here. Who's at the nucleus of it? Oh, Tim's at the nucleus of it. Goodwin's at the nucleus of it. These other guys are at the nucleus of it. Or, people like Michael Christmas, Jeff Replay, kind of our whole crew, Stizz, again, seeing that energy and being like, this is building opportunity. So I fell in love with that and, didn't think anything career wise. I didn't know anything about the music industry. Like our journey taught me about the music industry, those early days, like our experience with, your Atlantic situation, that was my first music industry lesson. And then, I learned the blog world and the media world and like, the independent sort of like music release world through watching guys like, Pat and Chance and Josh and Anwar with Casey and Dom Kennedy with his manager Archie. Like those were my kind of blueprints for, all right, well, there is a career here. But, even up till the time I graduated, I hadn't given any thought to a career, which I should have, but I was just so present. So when I look back at that stuff, I'm like, I'm so grateful for being present. And there's kids, these days that I mentor and, that consider me a mentor that are 18, 19, college freshmen, sophomores that, are so much more focused than I was, that are coming to me for advice. And, my intuitive advice to them is like, you're at such a better starting place than I was. And your focus is incredible. And your desire and your understanding of the community you want to be a part of is miles past what mine was. Mine was just like, again, like 2 or 3 years later, but just all instinct. So the fact that they're like already studying the business and identifying the roles and who they want, I'm like, that's incredible. But like, don't forget to live. Like, don't forget to be present. Because I think, my kind of seesaw was like, 95% just being present, 5% like, what does this look like for a career? And, I think some people are tipped in the other direction equally, and that's not good. I don't think it should be 5% present, 95% like, what does this look like? Because if you're really trying to get into this world from like a creative perspective, if you're trying to do, finance for a management company or finance for a label, or if you're trying to do something where you can just slot in, by all means, you don't have to live in the moment. You can just do your job, right? And that's a lot of people's goal and dream, and that's a great steady income and a great job. But if you're trying to be someone that like, generates the art or is a part of that process, then I think you need to balance that like really, career focus, like how do I get from point A to point B, with just like being present and immersing yourself in the experiences like we had. And we talk about where like you don't do shit the right way, or you don't know what the fuck you're doing, and you build relationships and you build memories and friendships, like, and there definitely is a way to skip that. And I don't think people should skip that. I think you should be able to look back 10 years ago and be like, I'm glad I messed up. I'm glad I had to learn that. I'm glad I just lived, you know?
Well, it's just a more rewarding.
It is. And the last thing I'll kind of cap off that point with, because I want to talk about it, is like, there's so much more access to information now than there was 10 years ago. So I think that was part of it. Like I wouldn't have even known where to start, right. And like Instagram gives you a way to access people.
Well, you see, yeah, you're right. I mean, if you had Instagram in the capacity that we have it now, back then in 2010, you would have very quickly understood what it actually looks like in the music industry from a business standpoint, who the players are, who the people at the label are, what their day-to-day looks like. I
know who Anwar Carrots, and he's a good friend of mine now. But I knew who he was through hearing Tyler on Yonkers.
Yeah.
Wearing synthetic wigs made of Anwar's dreadlocks.
Right.
And then I go to Mack's headline show at the House of Blues in Boston, and Casey's opening that tour, Casey Veggies, who Josh and Anwar were managing, and I see Anwar in the crowd, his dreadlocks, and I'm like, that's Anwar. But I knew about him through, there was no social media presence. It was just he was referenced in a song, so I knew who he was. And these days, like, you know, I'm not anybody super significant, but you know, if you know who Meekins is, or who Cousin Stizz is, or who I am just from my like writing and, you know, kind of blog or whatever journey, or Michael Christmas or T-Watt or whatever, you can very easily access me.
Right.
And I'm someone that like responds to a lot of people, and that happens across the board. So I think you get a lot of kids right now that are really dedicated and hardworking that are like, let me get every piece of information I can, have all the conversations I can, get all the mentorship I can, you know, follow the paths the best I can. And I think that's only good in moderation. I think you should do some of that, but I will tell kids specifically, like, don't try to do what I did.
Just do shit.
Just fucking do it.
Do shit.
And make mistakes and try to manage an artist. And you don't have to be perfect, but the balance is important. And I didn't have enough of the balance, so I learned it. You know, I had to learn it, and we learned it together. And I learned it with Michael Christmas, with Stizz, just trying it. I learned it. But you know, I think you can take advice and you know, kind of source and seek mentorship, but also like be present. I'm so happy I was present 9 or 10 years ago.
But when you're young too, it's like you also know more than you realize you know when it comes to, especially in our world, the creative music world and you know, media entertainment world. Like when I think about how you and Stizz kind of came up and Stizz grew this enormous excitement around him. A major label could have never curated that moment in time the way that you guys did organically, just off of having your ear to the street and understanding how to get excitement in the city and then on Instagram, and, you know, to the point where there's so much buzz and excitement around this artist, and then Drake's listening to
crazy.
him at, you know, Dave and Buster's in New York. And that is all because, and from an objective point of view, being friends with you guys and working with you as my manager that whole time, seeing how you guys were operating, you were able to take advantage of the most current moment in time in terms of like what was cool to do as a new artist and how to like basically market yourself as a new artist, because you were young and understood where we were at in that landscape of media, social media, YouTube, music videos, you know, Spotify, you know, all this different stuff that was happening right around that time. And so I completely agree. When I talk to like younger kids who are trying to kind of get in this world, that's my biggest piece of information is like, you know better than I do about what's going on right now.
Yes.
So lean into that. Like you probably are way more of an expert on TikTok or whatever this shit is, you know, right now.
Word.
So what worked for me isn't going to work for you, but the ideology that goes behind it will work for you.
Well, that's the thing. I always tell people, like, you know, I think taking inspiration, like hearing what you did to leverage the deal you got in fucking high school, you know, it's like the methods of distribution are very different,
right?
But like you had a hustle. Like people can learn from your hustle.
Just get in where you fit in. Yeah, exactly.
People can learn from me, you know, building a community where people said there wasn't one. That's a lesson, right? And you can do that digitally, you can do that in real life, whatever. But that was what I committed myself to, was like, I'm going to build communities in the blog world, build communities in Boston, and I'm putting faith, and it wasn't even thinking this far, but it was putting faith in like whatever I do. I trust the community. If it's great and if we're working really hard, I trust the community that we're building. That was the work, you know. There was a ton of work into the, you know, the music and the art and videos and marketing and rollout and all that, but the real work was the community building. So that looks very different now than it did 5 years ago, whatever.
Right.
So that's what I'm like. I'm always humbled, super humbled when anyone reaches out to me, because clearly there's some reason, and I think it's just because they look at maybe like a repeated, like, oh, there's a few things he's touched or artists that he's worked with that I'm a fan of. So there's something, right? And I still try to figure that out, because I don't look at myself that way. But that's why I say it's always very humbling, and I'm always honored. But I'm very careful in the way I communicate, because I'm like, I'm not, you know, I think I have great instincts. I think I'm a smart guy. I think I have good taste. But I am not, you know, some person that like cracked this crazy code that, you know, you have to learn from me how I did that. No, I was very present, and I immersed myself in the moment, and I worked really hard, and I fucking loved every fucking minute of what we were doing at that point. And I still do, but you know, when I think back to those days when we got it started, like, man, we had so much fun.
Right.
So much fun. And that also needs to be in moderation. If you have too much fun without, you know, without structuring a business, without planning for what's going to happen, that's bad too.
Eventually,
you know, like,
that just runs out, and then you're just left with nothing, right? Yeah, you got to have that balance, for sure.
But I definitely, same thing you know, you say, I always tell people, like, take inspiration from like bits of the story, but don't try to look at what I did or what you did or what anybody's doing for that matter as a blueprint that you need to follow.
Well, and as you get older in your career too, I mean, I look back at, you know, situations, meeting someone who was ahead of me or, you know, older than us, or, you know, kind of trying to show us the way. You know, none of that stuff ever pans out in terms of like a real legitimate path. I mean, if someone is rich enough and successful enough, you know, they're a billionaire or something like that, then, you know, maybe they can give you a layup.
Sure.
They can give you a fast track to success. But putting that aside, this notion of like finding myself the right mentor who's going to show me the path, that does not exist.
They don't know.
Nobody knows. Because everybody gets to their road.
This is important.
Individually.
Yes.
And nobody's path looks the same. Some people's paths are harder. Some people's paths are easier. It's easier if, you know, you're a privileged person in America. It's easier if you know, look one way versus looking at, like, all these things are very real. But my point is that like nobody's path is the same, and no one person who's ahead of you in the direction you're trying to go to is going to be able to show you the blueprint that's going to get you from where you are to where they are. And you got to figure that out.
And everyone, because this is the business, makes themselves look more together, that they have it figured out, that their business is tight, that they're fucking making hella money more than they do, because that's part of the fucking game. I remember being, you know, I think these are important stories to share. I remember, you know, Tunji, who's now the CEO of Def Jam, which is insane, you know, historic, you know, young in his 30s black executive to be the CEO of Def Jam is insane. And that was the first person to reach out to me in the music business, beyond like our Boston world. And I remember just being frustrated, you know, he's 8-9 years older than me or whatever. When he was reaching out to me, he was an A&R at Interscope. I saw he was working with Kendrick, and that was my favorite artist, Good Kid, Mad City, one of my favorite albums of all time. And I remember him reaching out, seeing whatever he saw in me, and being generous enough with his time to build a relationship with me, have me come through his office. And I remember feeling frustration for a couple years after, being like, man, like, I feel like I'm trying to get this guy to, like, you know, give me more advice or give me opportunities or hire me. And in hindsight, he really was. He connected me with probably 8 or 9 different people, being like, hey, you should meet Tim. And I look back, and I was naive at the time, but like, I didn't have the resume to be walking into a job like that. And Tunji was trying to kind of show me the way. But at the time, guys like him, guys like Steven Victor, people that I really look up to and had built relationships with, I was confused why they weren't. I'm like, hey, if you're this person, why can't you just bring me on? I can help you. But now that I'm not at that point, I'm not comparing myself to them at all, but now that I'm older and have been in the business longer, I'm like, there's kids that look at me like that. Like, why can't you just hire me? And I'm not about to tell them like, hey, I can't afford to pay you $75,000 a year.
Right.
I'm figuring out how I'm going to scale a company. I can't even hire somebody for, you know, like a group of people right now, because I need to it's not even just about money. It's about figuring out how your company is going to scale.
Right.
And I think it's, you know, naive and perfectly appropriate. Like, it makes sense, because I was there once upon a time, to make assumptions and to be like, hey, like, you know, if I'm down here and you're up here, can't you just like pull me up? But the reality is, this guy you're thinking has that ability doesn't have that ability.
Right.
He's just older, more experienced, more seasoned, makes more money than you do, sure, probably, but like, they're also trying to figure it out, you know, especially when people are working as an individual. That's a huge difference, right? It's like, you don't even have the ability to be like, oh, I work for this corporation, maybe I can find you a job within this corporation. You have an individual, you know, or an independent company or whatever. It's complicated, but that's a really important lesson that we both learned clearly, that you can't just assume like finding a mentor is the hardest thing in the world, and it just kind of has to fit like a puzzle. It just has to.
Well, and I just personally, I'm not a big proponent of the concept of mentor. I think you build relationships and you talk with people and you hear stories and you learn from people, and that can be a mentorship in a way.
I completely agree.
This notion that that's going to provide you a path and an opportunity is not true.
It doesn't happen,
and it's a waste of your energy, and you're better off learning through experience and just trying to go do things. If you want to be an artist manager, go manage an artist.
100%. The closest thing I could, say I have to a mentor is my friend Amir, who just one of the best people I think to exist. He's just a phenomenal person. He's my big brother. He changed my life, helped me believe in myself at a time where my capacity for that was low. It was running out, and he put a lot of faith in me, and that's someone I talk to frequently still, and once, twice a year we have like one of those just great phone calls, but there's never been like a direct exchange of information or him telling me you should do this, and neither of us have wanted that. And that's why I'm like, I'm not even going to say that's my mentor, because it's our relationship is more valuable than that. That's my friend who's been through more than I have, who's seen more than I have, who's really like a legendary figure in the music business. But I don't want him to necessarily tell me what I should be doing. And he knows, he's a very wise person. He knows that that's not what he should be telling me either.
Right.
So that's a relationship I literally can't even articulate or put a price on like what that relationship and Amir means to me, because he's just there. And I know like it's just deeper than like the music business. I'm like, that's someone I can just like, if I'm going through a hard time, I can just talk to. That's what I need. That's what we need. We need just people to talk to and people to hear us. And that's more valuable than anybody saying you should get this job and this job and this job, or try this. It's like, I think he's wise enough to look at me, and he, I'm sure, has that relationship with a lot of people. But he's wise enough to know like that's not what that person needs. What they need is a friend, like an OG, if you want to call it that. But like, that's my big brother. But I don't have a mentor.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. I think there's this incorrect kind of like, there's this whole kind of like hustle culture kind of concept out there where I think people are misguided and think like, the concept of having someone who's ahead of you in your career as a mentor can give you like opportunities, and it's just a myth. But that's not to say that having real relationships with people who are older than you and are wiser than you and have been through what you are maybe experiencing for the first time, that is extremely valuable. And so it's important to have those type of like partnerships and friendships and, working relationships with people who are 10, 20, 30, 40 years ahead of you, because man, those lessons are invaluable. And that can be a mentorship, if you want to call it that in some senses. But again, it's not providing you this path towards skipping the steps, and that's what people are looking at.
That's a great way to put it.
And I think another key point too is that these type of things go both ways too. If you're someone who is farther along in your career, older, man, you get so much just from a personal level, from a excitement level, from a staying fresh level. You get so much out of having a working relationship and a partnership with someone who's younger than you too.
It's fantastic. Yeah.
And so the point is just be with good people.
Yeah.
Connect with good people, all types of good people, older people, younger people. Stay fresh, stay inspired.
Man, it's a good point, because there is this kind of weird stigma, and I've felt it on both sides of like, if you're younger, I've definitely experienced a lot of like, I think very intentional people trying to remind me that I'm their junior, that I'm younger.
Right.
And that's whack. I have friendships, I'm thinking of my guy Nick Dybell, who's a sophomore in college, my guy Seamus Faye from Boston, who's still in college, and these guys are just doing incredibly well for where they're at, and they're both just super sharp young guys and talented, and like, I would bet any amount of money that those guys are going to have very successful careers in what they do, just like I would have with our guy Steph Coley 6 years ago, you know, when I first met him, because you just see, it's not even about the tangible shit. You just see a hunger. You see a determination in someone where you're like, this guy's not going to lose. He's just not. And I have a pretty good perception of that. But there's people definitely that in my life, I think probably saw that in me, but looked at it from more of a competitive standpoint than more of I need to give this guy affirmation that he's doing well. And that's why, like, when I deal with younger people now, people that look up to me, I never am too, you know, like, there is no ego, you know, like, I don't feel weird getting back to people quickly. I don't feel weird telling someone that they inspire me the way I inspire them. Like, I've had exactly what you alluded to. There's kids 8-9 years younger than me that, for all intents and purposes, don't have any like credits to their name, you know, or haven't done some tangible, you know, industry thing or broken an artist. But it's like, I see what they have, and I don't know where they're going to go necessarily, but they're going to go somewhere. And I don't have any hesitation in telling them, look, you're saying I inspire you, but like, your hunger, your determination, your foresight inspires me. Like, this is giving me energy. So it's great, but like, it goes both ways, and I'm not at a place where I'm not going to tell you that. I'm trying to give people their flowers. I wish more people told me that. And Amir told me that. And that's what mentorship to me really is. That's someone that isn't too egotistical or isn't too territorial to say, what you're doing, you young guy, is fucking special and you inspire me. That's all people need.
Facts,
and a lot of people are territorial and they don't want to give people, because they look at it as like, well, if I tell them that, then maybe they're going to get too comfortable and, you know, feel like they can access me more. But man, fuck all that. Like, you know, it don't matter if you miss a text here and there, miss an email here and there. That's all. We all do that. I do that. We do that with each other sometimes. We're all fucking busy. But don't get in a position and then consciously try to make someone younger or, you know, lower down the totem pole feel whack for like connecting with you.
Right.
Fuck that. And I have so much appreciation for the opposite. That's why when a guy like Amir, you know, since I was just doing my best to, like, you know, break into the business and try to understand myself and my position and all this, for him to just be accessible and be available and to say, like, look, this is a young manager that I believe in. For him to post that publicly, like, to him that might have just been like whatever, but to me that changed my fucking life, because I was like, this is someone that for whatever reason believes enough to share that with his following. And that's so powerful. And I think it's even more powerful, or equally, to, you know, to tell someone directly, like, you're coming to me for inspiration, but don't overlook the fact that you also inspire me and you have the capability of inspiring. Because, man, there's people, you know, Tunji's 39. He's going to run Def Jam. There's people going to be 60 working for him. What the fuck is age? It's not. The age is just, sometimes there's wisdom. It's experience, obviously. But, like, you know, being sharp, having good instincts like that, there can be somebody 16 right now that has instincts that are going to change the game.
Yep. Well, that's the thing. When you get closer to where we're at, which is a little bit past the young side, but not on the old side.
We're in the middle ground.
You realize this concept of, like, you know, you really figure it out as you get older, this and that. I think that's an illusion, man. Like, there are 50, 60, 70-year-old people who, you know, are in the same exact fucking boat as you at 20 years old. Like,
yep.
Some people figure life out, some people don't. And age is not a determiner of that fact.
No. And some people are self-aware, and some people will live their whole lives never being self-aware.
Exactly.
And never understanding, you know, and what is, like, what is figuring life out? I don't even know what that means anymore.
Yeah.
You know, that's why I always shift back. You know, alluded to it earlier in the conversation, but I tend to shift back to just the present, because the present has always worked for me. And that's not being ignorant of the future, and that's not planning, but that's being present, because that's what I can control. That's what I know. And that's your best chance of being self-aware, is really thinking, like, what matters right now to me.
Yeah. I mean, my thought on that is that, like, shit, man, we're all going to die one day.
Yeah.
Best to have a framework for how you're going about life that at least gives you the best foot forward at like slowing down your perception of time, you know? And when you're so focused on, man, I got to get here in my career, I got to like level up this and that. First of all, that type of attitude and energy is counterproductive to actually getting there, one.
Correct.
But two, you're in such a rush to get to this conceptual spot that you've built up in your head in the future that now you've just gone through life and, man, moments just fly by. And then your life is over.
Yeah. Well,
when you're living in the present, I feel you. And cheers, by the way. We
Cheers.
didn't do a proper cheers.
I know.
But when you're living in the present, you know, listen, when you're having a good time with friends and you're being social, like time can fly by, quote unquote. But when you're in the present trying to just enjoy the moment too, it can also slow down. And you're not in a rush to get to that next phase, because then, you know, once you get there, you're like, fuck, man, well, there goes those 20 years that I just spent just hurrying to get to that new spot. Like, enjoy the moment that you're in. Yeah. And let time slow down a little bit.
Well, the now is just the bet. You know, the moment you're waiting for is right now. It just is. There is no like waiting for it. Like, you're gonna get there. Whatever it is, you're gonna get there. If it's a vacation coming up, if it's an achievement, if it's selling out a show, if it's putting out whatever the fuck it is, like, you're going to get there. But if you're not enjoying the moment, you know, you're gonna get there and you're gonna look back and you're gonna say, why wasn't I present? You know, like that was the fun moment. Like, it's cliche, but it's very true. I found it to be true. Like, the journey is the destination. You know, like, when I look back at all of our different, I mean, let's even use just, you know, something we did together, like the Lamp City album, right? Like, that album came out number 3 on iTunes. It was very successful. It was, you know, an immediate fan favorite. The music was incredible. Like, that release, we did a little release party it was great. But it's like, when I think about that album, I don't think about the day it came out. I think about the memories we talked about earlier. I think about just us building friendships and building a community and like having this stupid like
those
music
like 2
video
years,
moment.
that moment in that time.
Yeah, and that's something like literally for my whole life. It don't matter what I do for the rest of my life and what you do, at least for me, like, I will always value that moment in time so much, because I'm like, it helped shape me because I was just in the moment. You know, I remember the video shoot days, the studio sessions, you know, just the conversations, the meetings we took in New York, driving down and, you know, meeting Steven and Shiv and going to LA and, you know, working with the people out here, shooting videos that never came out. Like, that was all part of this journey that kind of helped shape us. And then you get to have that moment, be like, all right, yeah, we all, if there's not something that you're working towards, then it's like, there's not really value in the journey. So it's important to have both. Like, you need to be working towards something. But, you know, that buildup, like, everything is about the buildup, you know, like, that's what matters. The journey is what really matters. That's when you form the memories. And if you're, you know, isolated and working the work, you should always be working hard, right? But it's like, if all you're focusing on is just the, you know, the X's and O's, then you're missing a lot of the purpose of this shit. The purpose is to live. The purpose is to be able to share a glass of wine and talk about the time you got kicked out of a hotel. That's the purpose of life.
Connect with people, live real life experiences, have a moment in time, even 30 minutes, an hour, whatever. Just enjoy these moments in time while you can be the busiest person in the world and still be in the present and enjoy all of those little moments. So there's this balance. Like, you can be an incredibly effective entrepreneur, business person, music, creative, entertainment, whatever, social media. Like, you can be this person that we all see, and some of us, you know, aspire to be like that, but you can still live in the moment as that person. It's a choice, I think, to enjoy and make time for meaningful connections with people, you know, and in that moment in time where you're actually experiencing something in the present, you know.
100%.
What do you think about that wine?
It's really good. I don't typically drink white wine, but this shit is really good. You like it?
Yeah, I do. So 2017, like, best year probably in the last 30, 40 years for white Burgundies, which is what we're drinking right now.
Okay.
So like this bottle and the bottles from this vintage 2017, they'll probably last 20, 30 years and be just fucking
crazy.
So good. Yeah, man.
Wow.
I got to get Amir on the podcast.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be great.
Bring you too, man. We'll set up the
I mean, that would be special.
3 microphones.
We got to do the one with Q. We got to do the group. Q's another guy, you know.
Yep.
He's been such a good friend, but you know, just
that dude is just a solid dude, man.
Fucking
like every interaction I have ever had with that dude has just been so solid, man. I remember when I opened up for Mack.
We're talking about Quentin Cuff.
Yeah. I opened up for Mack at the School of Rock in Hackensack, New Jersey, and
This was before you and I met.
This was before you and I met, and like, you know, this was like Mack was really starting to take off, but like not big yet, but starting to take off in the blog world, Good Music All Day world. And it was a co-headline technically. He was like headlining it, and I was like direct support.
That might have damn near been before Kids. Probably
no, it was 100% before Kids. It was what was the mixtape before that? Like this, he had just done a song with Chris Webby.
Right. Okay. Like that's the highlight for whatever. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Something
yeah.
Like that.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Because there was a song with Wiz.
Yes.
On the tape.
Yes. Yeah.
And so
I found out about him that summer. I remember I was
it was
home.
right. Yeah, it was right then.
Summer 2010. I found out about him, and immediately I was like, "This is the coolest shit ever! Like this dude is just too fucking cool."
Dude, it's just the man.
And then Kids came out and you know, blew up. But,
right.
Yeah. Anyway.
Right. No, and it's so cool to look back. I mean, talk about like living in the present and just doing good work, man. Like he just embodied that.
I mean, he was just the guy.
All aspects.
You can't like, you know, there's a number of these that come every once in a while, but like what Mack built, you know, and all those guys, Q, Tree J, the whole crew, like it was just so authentically them and so authentically Mack. You can't replicate it. It was a moment in time. Mack was just, and you know, we both knew Mack personally, and he was just like an incredibly special person who just like was the nucleus of so much, and his energy was unmistakable. And just, you know, back then I just, you know, what you felt, and then getting to know him 5 years later after that, the day I met him, you know, in his studio at his house, which was surreal, and that's all thanks to Q. I was just like, man, this is like it just made sense. You know, what you see on screen, you know, Kool-Aid and frozen pizza and Nikes on my feet in that era, what you're seeing is just this like dude who just looks cool as hell, walking through Pittsburgh, like all these different like streets and parks, clearly his neighborhood, everybody knows him. And he just looks like the fucking man. Like he just looks like somebody you know, that would have all the girls around and you would want to be around. And then you meet him and you're like, he's exactly that fucking guy.
It's
like,
just the most authentic thing.
You go into the studio and what made it so much better is like he had all that, but he was still dapping up everybody in the room, introducing himself. Like he was just a unicorn, man. Like he was somebody that had it all. And, you know, every dude wanted to be like him. Every girl wanted to get with him. Like he was just that fucking guy.
Yeah.
And that, you know, but then you meet his crew, you know, his brother, Q, Jimmy, like that whole crew, and they're just the most solid dudes across. Justin Boyd, his photographer, like those guys are all my guys still, you know, because they're just great fucking people. And when you meet the crew, that's when I think you start to understand like, oh, this is who this dude Mack really is, because look at the people he's got around him. Everybody's solid.
100%. 100%. Yeah, and you know, it's incredibly rare that we are ever blessed with a person like that who is so authentically themselves and just so overwhelmingly dedicated to their art form as he was.
Yeah.
You know,
I've never seen anything like it.
And like for somebody who's an artist themselves, I mean, you know, what I struggle with every day is finding that motivation to keep going and keep being an artist and keep, you know, all that stuff. And then, you know, you hear about like we are lucky to kind of have had the access in some ways to Mack more so than other people.
Sure.
And knowing how dedicated he was in the studio and how much music he had at any one period in time, and just how incredibly talented he was in the studio with all instruments and everything like that. I mean, it's just like, for me as an artist, it's just like, man.
Yeah.
Just
it's crazy. I mean,
a special talent that is a, once in a generation type of thing.
Yeah, it really is. There's a lot of people that can get famous and get a following and tour and all that, but seeing that up close, like, I remember Swimming came out and, we're at the crib 2 weeks later and, he's just working on shit.
Yep.
And not out of the sense of like, I need to stay busy, but you could just tell like that was just dude's life. Him. Like he just loved creating, loved making music. That was his home. It was fucking, such a blessing to see up close. And that's why, I always bring it back. I'm like, Q's my fucking guy, but I'm like, without Q, I don't have those experiences.
Right.
Christmas doesn't have those experiences. We're not all hanging out at Carl's house. Like that's just what it is, like,
yep.
Like,
Yep.
Q is the guy. Mack had obviously foresight and vision and, just incredible talent. But, I think a piece of that puzzle with any artist, any successful creative person is having somebody that's like just tapped in and that's a good dude, and that was Q. That was the conduit into the Mack world was Q, just peeping my writing, peeping the artists I was working with, just peeping fucking everything. He still does to this day. Like that's a dude. I've told this to him. I've said it publicly, but like I admire him so much as a friend and, as someone in the music business, because there's so many people that are successful that are really afraid to put their name on something because it doesn't benefit them at the moment.
Right.
And there's not an immediate payoff and it's a risk, that's how people see it. But Q, I've known him for 7 years and he's somebody that will share music, he'll share artists, or he'll share articles that he has no stake in, that he has no reason to necessarily believe that they're going to benefit him in any way. He's just a guy with great taste and someone that's not afraid to co-sign stuff. And that's really valuable and something the world needs more of. And he's just a great example of someone that just speaks from the heart.
It's just doing stuff because you love it, man, and doing the right thing. And you're right, man. It's so true when you have someone who's such a talent like Mack was, that piece, the partnership with somebody who has the ear to the street, it's just it creates a beautiful opportunity in this synchronization between these kind of two things that can create real meaningful moments in time that are just, again, like we said, once in a generation type of thing.
And it all comes back to trust. It's like those two have their trust, and then Mack has the trust that anyone Q entrusts is worthy of Mack's trust. And that's what, even when I first stepped in his house for the first time, I'm like, I feel like this dude accepts me into his home, and it's clearly because he trusts Q so much that Q's not bringing anybody in that Mack wouldn't also like or appreciate or not feel weird around. And that level of trust is like so dope in a friendship, in a business relationship. Like,
totally.
That's something everyone should aspire to.
Facts. Yeah, and back to that show, like that was what I identified back in 2010 was, and Q was there, Tree J, all these guys, and they got together right before the show. And, I think they like got in a group and kind of like said a little prayer and this like little moment in time. And I just remember thinking like, man, there's just the focus, the attention to detail and the just genuine authenticity that is this whole camp is so inspiring. They were just so genuinely them and just fucking killed the show. And man, fun times, man.
Yeah. Damn. Yeah, I wish I'd been there for that era.
Facts. Well, shit, man.
A little late.
1:45 is probably a good time to wrap it up, man.
I was ready to keep going.
Well, we can keep going. I just got to use the bathroom.
That's fine.
Shit. All right, I'm going to do that, and then we'll keep going. We'll be right back. And we're back.
I was just talking to Johnny Yukon. He's going to play with us on Friday.
Oh, by the way, I loved that the Drake golf fit you got.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I had to cop 2 Nocta. If anyone asks, they send it to me, but really, I bought them.
Are they sold out or?
I think so. I think the 2 that I bought. I mean, they released a whole line, and there was one jacket that was like $500 that did not sell out, and I can understand why. It looked like something that.
Can you golf in the jacket or no?
In which jacket?
In the one that's not sold out?
Yeah, for sure. It's just
like it's a golf
really
jacket?
high priced. Yeah, it's beautiful, but it's like it's some shit I might have paid $250 for. Might have. You know, I bought the little crew neck you saw. Not the crew neck. It's like a windbreaker type material, but that was like. It was like 125 or something. It was like reasonable. It wasn't crazy.
Right.
And it's great. It's like, I don't have anything that color, and it's great material, and I don't have a golf jacket like that. So it was just good timing. And then I bought the little like black crew neck for like $55 or something. So.
Yeah. Is Drake golfing like that?
Hell no. Probably not. I don't know, but man, I've never seen him. But shout out to my guy, Mr. Morgan, who I told him we got to get a round in.
Facts.
He golfs. I know that. I don't know who else in the Drake crew does, but
right.
Morgan does. Morgan's that guy.
It was a whole thing, right? With it's like a connection with his uncle, who's a big golfer or something like that.
I sent it to Stizz because he said Uncle Stizzy, right? And like over the course of Stizz's career, there's like just way too many weird parallels with Stizz and Drake, and we just joke about that a lot. And then when he announced that, I'm like, he's Uncle Stizzy. Like, come on, like we never heard of this person before,
right?
You know, but dedicating a whole collection. But the shit is fire. I mean, you know, it's Nike. At the end of the day, I'm a Nike sponsored guy. You know, Nike sent me a couple packs. So
shouts out.
I consider myself a Nike sponsored athlete. It's weird, man. Like psychologically, when like brands will send you shit, you know, like it doesn't mean anything other than obviously I'm super grateful for it. But like I consider myself like a Nike guy now. Like literally just them like sending me Nike shit. I'm like, I can't wear Adidas.
Oh, it's extremely powerful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially if it's done in like the right way too. Mm-hmm. You know, like if you actually get something that you're genuinely like, oh man, like that was dope.
Well, that's the thing. I rock everything. I mean, when we did that like Nike basketball league, they gave us $1,000+ worth of material. You know, fucking 2 different pairs of shoes. You know, Kyrie's, Kobe's. You know, duffel bag, shorts, jerseys, whatever. You know, jackets. And ever since then, I'm like, shit. I mean, it's just great marketing, right? Because it's then you create this allegiance, and all you're doing is just sending some gear to people, but you create this like brand loyalty where you're like, shit, if this company did this for me, yeah, I'm gonna go out and cop the Drake Nocta Nike collection because
1,000%.
I have this allegiance to Nike at this point.
Right.
Adidas never sent me shit. So
yeah, and they should almost do it more, you know.
I know. There's so much value in that.
So much value.
Top that off. It's almost done.
There you go.
This is great wine.
Yeah, it's great, right? It's just super smooth. And I don't
super
usually
smooth.
love white wine.
I don't either, but I like this a lot.
But here's the thing, man. You know, yeah. See, now we got no weight in there, so it's just floating.
Right.
You know, with white wine, it's just about whether or not you're getting some quality shit. If you got some quality shit, then you're really rolling.
Yeah. Do you feel like it's a little different with red? Like there's more room for...
Yeah, I think maybe that's my preference because I'm more of a red guy, but I can tolerate drinking a range of reds. Like
sure.
I find value in a cheap red that's just, you know, getting the job done. The thing with reds, and not as much with whites, they do this with whites too, but like with a cheap red wine, especially like a California domestic wine, most of the flavor you're getting is from the vanilla oak barrels. And so they just throw these like
I didn't know that.
wines into these barrels, and the flavor that you're getting in like a $15 bottle of wine is from the barrel. It's not from the wine. And so you're getting vanilla.
What's the price threshold where you're really getting like a great wine, or is it not just based on price?
Okay, so it absolutely, price has a big, you know, determination of quality for sure with wine, but it's different per region and it's different where you're at. So in America, for us, in California, you can get a great bottle of wine domestically from California for Cabernets or Washington for Pinot Noir for $20, $25. Even some could be solid at $15. And so the best bang for your buck from a quality standpoint, if you live in America, is to buy like a $25 California red. Or, you know, a $25 Washington or Oregon Pinot Noir. And when you talk about French wines in America, you're not getting good quality wine in America that's French unless you're paying more than like $80.
That makes sense.
Because they're importing it into the country.
Sure.
And you got all the tariffs associated, and all the good wines that are a part of that region are getting sold locally. And so the cheap $15, $20 wines that are French wines coming to America are horrible because they're just kind of like, you know, the way that cheap wines get made is that it's like, if you want to create a wine brand, right, you can basically just like source a bunch of different grapes from like these, you know, village level wineries that are growing the grapes. And then you just grab a bunch of those grapes and you put them together and you slap a label on it. And now you've got a $10 or $15 bottle of wine. The step above that is a winery that is like actually making its own bottle. They own the real estate, they grow their own grapes, then they put it in their own bottle. Right. And that's when you start to get like good quality stuff because it's controlled and it's like one area, one plot of land growing all these grapes. And then a step beyond that is you're doing all that, you're bottling your own wine, you're growing your own grapes, but it's in a really good geographic area that's really healthy for the grapevines. Right? And then then the last one, like the really like top of the line wines, have this combination of it's their own plot of land, it's in a really amazing geographic location, maybe, you know, it's kind of on this little hill right where the sun hits it perfectly and all the conditions are perfect, and those vines themselves have been there for sometimes hundreds of years, right? And so they're so embedded in the soil of that area that when you're growing the grape, you can taste the nuance from the soil in the wine.
Wow.
And so the older the vine and the longer it's been in the soil, because if you envision a bunch of these grapevines and the vines going under the soil, right? It's like roots of a tree. The longer it's there, the more these roots spread out under the soil. And so for some of these like really, really top of the line French wines and Italian wines, like these vines have been there for hundreds, some of them thousands of years.
That's fascinating.
And so you're tasting the soil, and that's where you get like ageability for a wine. Is a wine can be aged if it's one of those combinations of like the right conditions, the right location, the right sunlight, the old vine
so
that's
many
got
variables.
all these, you know, kind of nuances to the flavor. And then as you age it over 10, 20, 30 years, the fruit flavor starts to change to the soil flavor.
Wow.
And you get some of that earthy kind of like mushroomy.
That's really interesting.
Taste.
Yeah.
And so that's where like an ageability to a wine comes from essentially. But anyways, back to like price and, you know, trying bang for buck, like you're not getting good shit in America from France unless it's like over $80 because all the stuff under that is just that village stuff that's just like piling in a bunch of the bad grapes that have been grown and they just bottle it and whatever. And Italian, it's kind of same, you know, $50, $60, you can get some good stuff in America. So yeah, it's really fascinating, man. Yeah. Really fascinating. But it flips. If you go to Europe and you're in Bordeaux, you can get a $12 bottle of Bordeaux and it's fucking awesome because
a cab from Napa isn't going to be the same at that price point. I got some cab. I'm going to order some more from this winery called Visa Tui. That was just phenomenal. It was like $100 bottle of cab that Jazz and I drank that day, but it was just like incredible. Yeah, like one of the best cabs I've ever had. And it was just they only sell it direct. You know, it's not in restaurants, it's not in stores. It's just you got to buy it from that winery specifically. You either order it or buy it there. Right. But it was just fantastic.
Yeah, what's cool about California is that like realistically, they have the best conditions for growing Cabernet grapes. And Bordeaux, which is the other big producer of Cabernet, they do the Bordeaux blend, which is Cabernet Sauvignon and a little bit of Cabernet Franc and Merlot. And depending on where in Bordeaux, on the left side of Bordeaux, it's mostly Cabernet Sauv heavy, like 75% Cab Sauv, then a little bit of Franc, a little bit more Merlot. And then on the right side of Bordeaux, it's Merlot heavy with a little bit of the other two cabs. Yeah. But just from a weather standpoint, the grape of Cabernet is really best suited to grow in the California area. And so
that's interesting.
From a quality standpoint...
Is there that much of a climate difference between Bordeaux and Napa?
Yeah, because Bordeaux is a lot colder and rainier.
That's what I figured.
But then it has these hot summers. And the hot summers is where...
So it's more akin to like a northeast United States almost. Closer to
that, yeah. And you know, Northern California has that kind of climate too, where it's a little bit of the seasonality...
It's more steady though.
It's steadier, but also too, the big thing with Napa is like the hills, right? So it's the way that the sun hits these areas.
That's
because Napa is a valley, right?
Sure.
And so the prime real estate of Napa can grow these incredible renditions of like the Cabernet grape, more so than Bordeaux really ever could.
Yeah.
But Bordeaux historically is that Cabernet place.
That's just historically. Yeah,
historically.
That's interesting. That's really interesting.
But from a quality standpoint, like you can do some amazing shit just with the baseline of what California has to offer from like the land and all that shit. So it's a really interesting kind of thing, man. And you can go down a rabbit hole with wine, and I've kind of done.
Have you been to the Napa area?
No.
We got to do a golf trip up there one day because there's a lot of golf courses, and like we should just get a
100%.
handful of guys and go do that. That would be so much fun. Yeah, the drive, because we were staying west of the mountains, right? Like we're like 20 minutes from the shore, and Napa. There was a ton of wineries in our region. Sebastopol is like the area. It's still part of the whole region, but Napa, where we did the wineries, was about 45 minutes over the mountain range, and that drive is crazy. I mean, like,
I bet.
You know, that's why, like, you gotta, if you're going to winery, you gotta get a fucking chauffeur. Like, it's not something to fuck with. I mean, drinking and driving never is, but like, especially that.
You
like,
need to be prepared.
I mean, it's 10 miles an hour the whole trip, like through that stretch of mountains. Like, you know, Jazz and I we're getting in fights about it because, like, you know, I drive a little quick, you know, and like you just can't. It's harrowing, but it's beautiful. You know, it's just through this heavily wooded redwoods area, you know, and then you get to that valley where, like you're saying, just geographically like that, it's just the perfect conditions for growing those grapes.
Exactly.
And it's all literally grape leaves everywhere. It's just, that's all you see. It's just in the distance, you see mountains, you see the occasional palm tree, which is weird, and then you just see the grape leaves forever. It's gorgeous.
And so what's cool about California is that really from a condition standpoint, it's like prime real estate. But these vines, because of prohibition, right? These vines haven't been around for that long. And so California is New World wine. And so they're young vines growing really amazing grapes, whereas Bordeaux is, they don't have the perfect combination of conditions, but it's amazing still, and it's that kind of Bordeaux style of the rain and wet, then the hot summers. That's when you create like a really good Bordeaux vintage.
Yeah.
But what Bordeaux has going for it is that these vines have been there since, like, some of them from like the 1400s, like centuries, that these vines have been there growing these grapes.
Yeah.
And so some of these like top Bordeaux wines have been making wine for hundreds of years.
It's crazy.
Under the same label.
Yeah.
Right? Like there are wines from like the 1700s under like Lafite that are still to this day like Lafite wines.
Let me ask you this, because you're more you're deeper into, I consider myself a very casual appreciator fan of wine. You're pretty deep in the world. Do you think, you know, if you were to do like a blind taste test, right, and you were to be given, you know, Chateau Lafite or any of these like esteemed wines from these different regions, you know, that are just the best of the best, do you think you would immediately, because you have a certain palate now, like immediately be like, oh, this is something special? Or do you think part of it is just like the history and the knowledge of like, this is
No, I think I could
crazy.
get it. I think I could get it. I mean, if you were, so the Somm level 2 test is that, but it's so you have to do 5 blind tastings, and you have to 100% accurately say the grape varietal and the region.
Wow.
So you have to say, so like this, right? You smell it.
Yeah.
You taste it, and you say, okay, that's a Chardonnay grape from Burgundy. And you can even go another level into like the neighborhood.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
And obviously, I know this one because I picked this bottle.
Sure, yeah.
But the Somm level 2 test is you take 5 wines from anywhere in the world, and you have to do that, right? And so I don't know that I could do that.
Yeah.
I think I could get pretty close. I think, if you put a Cabernet, if you put a California cab in front of me, I think I could tell you that's a California cab. And then I think if you put a Bordeaux wine in front of me, I think I could tell you, oh, that's a Bordeaux. And if you put a Super Tuscan in front of me, I could probably say that. And, I think I could get pretty close across the board, but I could definitely tell you a good wine versus a bad wine.
Yeah.
For sure, without a doubt. If you put in front of me like a 1995, Bordeaux, one of the top wines from that area of France that's got some age to it, I could be able to smell the nuances and the age. Because as a wine gets 10, 20, 30 years old, then you're starting to like smell.
There's just more notes to
on
it.
the
like,
nose, the complexity.
Yeah.
Because when a wine's young, you're tasting the fruit. And as time goes on, the oxidization of the wine starts to bring out some of that, what they call terroir in France, which is like the soil and all that shit.
Gotcha.
And, this is the thing about wine, man. Like, there are people that can be like really snobby about it in this kind of like douchey kind of way. Yeah. And I'm not about that at all. What interests me about wine is the historical aspect of it. The fact that there are like these places in France and Italy particularly, which is like the type of stuff that I'm really into because of that historical aspect, that have been doing this shit for so long through different generations and different like world powers, wars. You can learn about history in itself through learning about wine.
Sure.
Like in 1945, when France was liberated from Germany, so they were liberated from Germany, and that summer, it was the super rainy winter. And then that summer, right after liberation from Germany, they had this like beautiful, symbolic, hot summer, right?
Yeah.
And so the wine that was produced from 1945 is considered in the last 100 years probably the best vintage of the 100-year 20th century because of that condition of like the rainy winter and then the hot summer. And on the bottle of 1945 Mouton Rothschild, there's a V for victory on the bottle.
Wow.
And
that's so fucking cool.
It's like, wow, man. Like, and Mouton Rothschild was taken over by the Germans during the war and used as a firing station, like basically, doing like target practice in the fucking vineyards.
Unbelievable.
And there's a whole history of Nazi Germany raiding all these cellars. So like you don't find a lot of 39 and 38 vintage and 40 vintage because the Germans stole all of that wine.
That's unbelievable.
Right? And so that to me is like
the V is crazy.
Oh,
what
it's
a story.
Fascinating. Fascinating.
Wow.
And so that's what I like about wine. I don't like the fucking put my pinky up and be a fucking douchebag, whatever.
Yeah.
But like learning the history of some of that shit is just so cool to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's a way to almost like participate in history in a unique way.
Definitely, yeah.
Because you could still drink a bottle from 1945 if you had, $100,000.
Yeah. Hey, one day.
But so that's what's cool to me is it's like this combination of learning about history and then being able to actually like participate in something that was from that time too.
Totally.
But yeah, man, really, really cool moments like that are what stood out to me and made me go down the rabbit hole of like getting interested in it a little bit more.
Yeah, I remember. Super interesting. I love historical context of anything. It makes everything, I don't know, it's just like, there's everything is cyclical, right? So it's like anything that has happened in our history, there's going to be some version of that in the future, and being able to connect whatever we're going through to some struggle or some type of war or whatever. It's, hearing that victory, symbolically, like we know, I'm just drawing this off the top of my head, but it's like even coming out of a global pandemic, it's like there's a certain feeling where it's like, not fully out of it, but you know the emotion that comes with being on the other side of something. So you can at least imagine what that felt like for that winery or that producer or whatever, to be like this fucking miracle of this perfectly seasoned crop, after this hell. And you feel like you're there. I don't know, like that's part of the experience, right?
Totally,
it's just,
totally. Well, and just the symbolism too of like they were liberated And right after that comes this like amazing period of like this hot summer, and the symbolism of that is just like, man, what are the chances of that?
Right.
You know, and then,
like the one in 100 years is 1945.
Right.
It's crazy.
Right. And so then the other side of that too is like, so there's a bottle of 1942 or 1943, these vintages, right? And you can go on some of the websites of some of these old Bordeaux chateaus, like Chateau Margaux, which is like a big, one of the top wines of Bordeaux. And they have every vintage from the last, 150 years, and they have a description of it, right? And I was looking the other day at the description of the 1942 vintage for Bordeaux, and, I'm paraphrasing, but it was something along the lines of like, this was a not strong vintage that was, a little bit, harsh conditions, and this wine has long been forgotten, and it said something along the lines of like, as with the memories of that time period in France's history, this wine is better put to the side and, kind of, like it was described in this way that was like acknowledging the tough, horrible conditions that France was under Nazi Germany's rule, and how the wine almost like reflected that period of time in this like symbolic way.
Wow.
And it was kind of this part of their history of their winery, because they were taken over by the Germans. The Germans were running the winery.
Yeah.
And, they kind of sum it up in this way where it's like, this is not a good vintage that we want to like, move past because of this. And then you contrast that with like 1945, we're liberated, this hot summer, perfect conditions, amazing wine that's like still drinkable today because of its like ageability. Crazy.
That's insane.
Yeah. So I think it's definitely tough to taste like the nuances sometimes, but I think if you put a good bottle in front of me versus a bad one, I could tell you.
Yeah,
that
makes sense.
What's what, for sure.
Yeah.
But especially with like something that's got some age to it, because you can definitely tell the difference of a bottle that's got some age. I remember when you and Stizz celebrate, because me and Stizz have basically the same birthday. Me, you, Stizz, and was it Steph that was with us? Who else?
Blaine.
Blaine. We went to dinner, and I think we had a 89 bottle of Du Cru Bacayou, which is a French Bordeaux wine, and like that had 30, 40 years of age to it. And it almost tastes like a freaking like catcher's mitt with like a little bit of like cherry. You know what I'm saying? Like,
that was a weird night for me.
Oh yeah, facts. Well, you got
I got sick. I don't know what the fuck happened.
Yeah, it might have been the 40-year-old wine. I don't know.
Something I ate. I don't know what it was. That was the first and hopefully last time
It was probably the Ruth Chris steak. I gotta say.
I didn't have that though. I had that. Well, I mean, that was probably part of the problem, is I didn't have anything except
the wine,
the wine, and then the champagne. We had champagne.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, you didn't have anything to eat, obviously.
And then, but I ate well before.
Right.
But I don't know what happened. But I had mushrooms in my meal that night. I haven't had them since, because it was just my memory of like that was what I tasted when I fucking threw up in a gas station garbage can.
Yeah, fuck, man.
I hope that's the last time I do that.
Would you ever take psychedelic mushrooms at this point in your life?
Probably not. I mean, you know this better than anyone, but like, with my allergies, I'm just, overly cautious, I would say, with anything I ingest.
Right.
So it's not even on some like, I'm opposed to that experience. I actually, I'm pretty intrigued by that experience, but I definitely have, I think, what will be a lifelong fear of having something that my body does not agree with. So I'm like, I'm much more like risk averse than the average person just because of that. So, but I'm very intrigued. I love hearing people's stories about their trips,
Right. Yeah, I got these little fucking things from because there are these companies now that are making like these gummies.
Yeah.
And they'll send them out to you. And I have like 5 packs of them, but I haven't even touched them. And I've never done any of that stuff. And I'm like,
no. Yeah, I had a friend that was in town a few weeks ago, and we've known each other online for a minute. This
I won't say who it is, but a good friend of mine, just kind of online friend for a long time, and basically hit me up being like, you want to do some shrooms or whatever the next day. And I, part of me just on a social level was like, yeah, like that sounds like I'm down for that experience. But, my limit with my allergies and just what I'm afraid of ingesting will always, I think, prevent me from doing shit like that, even though I'm curious.
Yeah.
I've had friends that have done ayahuasca, retreats and trips that have had life-changing experiences and speak so highly of it. And that's great, but might not be for me.
Yeah, it's definitely another one of those kind of like conundrums, because you hear the positive stories and then you hear the few examples of the scary.
It's tough, man. And these days, especially, not comparing like psychedelic drugs or whatever, but I mean like the laced shit is rampant these days across the board. I mean, like there's friends of friends that in the last few months have died from fentanyl, and obviously we know others that have suffered that same fate. And it's like, it's just tough, man. It's a tough game to play, the drug shit these days. Like, it's just, I read some stat the other day, like 1 in 3 these days, like Coke is laced with fentanyl, and it just seems
dude, even
common.
in New York, marijuana is being laced with fentanyl. Like, it's like nothing is safe from this, and that's another
awful,
pandemic that's going on.
Very much so.
Yeah. People are dying from overdoses more so than ever before. And it's just like, how do we get out from under that? Like that's an extremely complex issue.
Yeah.
That was pretty much entirely created by capitalism and like, drug companies and corporate America, essentially.
Oh, yeah.
But there's really no recourse there. Like a lot of the recourse has already kind of been determined, and a lot of these companies have paid off settlements and this and that, and it's peanuts to what they're making on a yearly basis, right? But yeah, man.
Yeah, it's tough. I always, anytime I hear about, or just, know friends that do drugs or whatever, partake in shit like that, I always say, just be careful. That's always my kind of sign off, is like, look, we're all old enough to make our own decisions, but just be careful, because shit is scary.
Yep. I hear you, man. Well, shit, dude. Covered a lot of things.
Yeah, a lot of things.
Wine, drugs, mushrooms.
Yeah, it was heavy, but it was good.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming over, man. How do you feel about the in-person
fucking
dynamic?
amazing, man.
It's so much better, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
I want to do more of this. This inspires me. I'm like, I want to get us in here with some guests. I want to, it would be a great, having Amir, Q, people we mentioned, anybody else, like.
And it's a great little studio too.
It's great, man. I love this little space.
Like, talk about being present. Like, I feel like this feels like a creative space.
It feels great.
It's all you need. I used to have this studio in Brooklyn, as you know, that was like this.
Yeah, I was never there.
Little. Yeah. Did you ever? You never?
I was
went
only at your apartment. I would never, because you kind of got that studio space, I think, by the time I had moved back.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. I was in the studio in Bushwick, and it was this kind of like, it almost was like this weird thing that would happen with your head, because it was so soundproofed that it was like too quiet inside, and so it starts to kind of like fuck with you. And it was this like rectangular room with no windows, and it had good sound quality from a recording standpoint because of that, but it felt a little bit like the walls were kind of closing in on you because it was a small room. And then I moved to LA right after you, and Static Selector was in the room next to me at this like studio spot, and he ended up taking my studio, breaking down the wall, and creating like a huge studio. And Millyz was pulling up all the time. Terminology was.
I didn't know he broke down the wall.
That's crazy. He broke down the wall, created like my room that I used to have turned into like a vocal booth for him.
Oh, sick.
And yeah, I know like a lot of that, like the Millyz Static Selector album, the collab album that they made there.
Yeah,
and
crazy.
Yeah, man. A lot of people in that little space right there.
Man, I would love to have Millyz. I know you guys were.
Bro, I texted him. I texted him today because he was in LA a couple weeks ago and he was supposed to come on.
He's just on the move, man. He's crushing it. But I would love to have a conversation with him, with both of us.
Facts.
you and him, but I would love to do it with both of us.
Well, if he comes on, I'll tell you. You can come,
know, man.
and we'll just do a 3-person podcast for sure. Because I got the additional mic.
Yeah,
and we'll just make it happen.
Millyz is, just crushing it. Great example of just staying down,
dude. I mean, 15 years he's been like putting in the work, bro. Like since before I was doing shit, he was on that same hustle.
Me too. When I was working at The Buzzer, the sneaker consignment shop in Alston, that was before I started my blog, 2011. And the first day at my job, there was like stickers and flyers and stuff at the cash register. And I remember seeing a stack of CDs, and they were Millyz CDs.
Yep.
And it was like, I couldn't tell you what series it was a part of, but it was like volume 4 or 5 of whatever series mixtape he was doing.
Yep.
That was in that store, and that was summer 2011, right? So it's like, by summer 2011, he had already been at it,
100%.
Been at it. And that's 10 years ago plus, where he had already kind of, and I remember doing the 12 for 12 thing and becoming myself kind of like a player in the scene, and, working with you, and then getting Christmas and Stizz off the ground, and the whole thing. And throughout that whole time, he was one of the only guys that was a little older than us that I felt like was super receptive to everything that was going on. He was like, he would hit me just asking for some input on things. He was, shouting out the 12 for 12 movement, shouting out artists. Like, that dude was like, he was just so excited about what he was doing, and he always like committed to being a part of the community. And I don't know, I think at that point, there was a lot of people that were kind of like, what the fuck is this like youth movement here, and he was like, I might be a little older, I might be, I might have a little more experience, but there's something to learn from this, and that's a great lesson. And we've watched him just double down on what he does well and fucking take off the last 5 years.
No, 100%. And like, yeah, I remember like every different scenario that I was in through my career, it was a situation where you'd run into Millyz because he's in the studio session after you at the same studio at Cyber Sounds, or, Sanctum Sound, or, he's doing this show with Leeds, or he's over here. Like, he was always just on the grind from a musical standpoint through all these different generations of artists that have come through Boston. And for him now to have like hit his stride and just be out of here, like in my mind, dude is out of here, bro. Like, he's killing it.
Well, it's inspiring because he's a fucking rapper.
Well, but that's what I'm saying. Like, and
he's
that's
rapper.
The other thing, man.
Like, he could have made it in 06. It's like he could have been fucking signed to G Unit or something.
Right.
Like, that dude is just a fucking amazing rapper.
100%.
And it's like he weathered the storm of like literally 10 plus years of the industry, like not really appreciating like rappers, and then he literally waited his turn. And then with the the Griselda movement, with Freddie Gibbs kind of coming back in the mainstream,
Dave
sort of
East,
light, Dave East, all of those guys, like guys that are really rapping, like it was his turn. He got on deck, and he had been doing what he's been doing for 15 years, and he was ready for the spotlight. And like, there's a lot to take from that, that like there's a lot you can't control, and what you can't control is trends. What you can control is what you do and your skill set.
Right.
And then there's going to be a time where, whatever your skills, you're going to find a place for your skill set, and he did. And he straight up raps better than most people, 99% of rappers. He's
1,000%.
He's a phenomenal rapper.
And that's the cool thing about him is that he's been putting in the work for so long, so he's got that catalog and that history of so much music out there.
That's part of the narrative. Then people see that
freestyles,
and they're like, yeah. And then people see that narrative, and that I think years ago that might have worked against somebody, but these days it's like, if people see, this dude's been, same with Benny the Butcher. People see Benny the Butcher, local Buffalo blog post from 07, and they're like, that's so fucking cool, And then the same thing's happening with Millyz, where they're like, wait, this guy's been putting out this type of content for 15 years. Like, that makes me want to fuck with him even more.
1,000%. Yeah, and it's just so fucking authentic and organic, like, and you're right, and even with me, right, like, in my kind of subgenre of this, like, alternative, white boy, hip-hop, kind of lane that I've been in the last 10 years, like, every interaction I've ever had with Millyz is just, like, the most fucking authentic. Like, he sees what I'm doing, he's doing what he's doing, he has a mutual respect for anybody who's in this music space from the Massachusetts area that's in their own lane, you know, and people are in different spaces, you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Like the type of music that Millyz making is very different than what I'm making versus what is, you know, Stizz, you know, or anybody else. And all these things can coexist at the same time. Yeah. And Millyz is one of those dudes who's just always supported the entire concept of like Massachusetts-based artists supporting one another and, you know, moving forward as a location where good music can come from.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah, man. Important player. Important dude.
Facts.
Yeah.
Facts. So if I bring him on, you're going to come through. We're going to make it happen.
That'd be great.
For sure.
I would love that. We'd have a lot of stories, a lot of shared experiences and unique experiences that kind of overlap.
Oh, so many. I remember being in Iowa City with Huey Mack, and Sam Adams was doing a show at the Blue Moose Tap House in Iowa City, which is probably the best venue in the country.
No way. I've never been.
Well, Iowa City is just this like college town, and they have this venue there that's like it's like a Middle East downstairs kind of venue, but it's just so fun.
Wow.
And the people in Iowa City are just like ready to have a good time, and it's just like the most cool little like 4-block radius of this like college town with pizza spots and bars and the music venue, and then the college is like right there. You can like see it. And there's like the hotel right here, and you know it's just this little tiny little town.
Yeah.
And Sammy Adams and Millyz were on tour together, and so we went to their show and just had a like epic night with Millyz. And this was like 5 or 6 years ago. You know what I'm saying? And again, like dude's just been on the grind.
Oh yeah.
Like
heavy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Well, shit. Should we wrap this up?
Yeah, we could. I mean, we could go on, but yeah, you know, this is a good point to wrap it up.
Yeah, it's a good point to wrap it up. We're out of wine, so that's really the big determiner.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah, we could go to the fridge.
Don't tell me that. I'd sit here all day, man.
We could go to the fridge, but part 3 really coming soon for sure.
Facts. Yeah.
But man, Tim, I appreciate you doing this, man. As always,
man. This was a pleasure.
Appreciate everything.
Yes, sir.
You've done for me, the Boston community, everybody else that you work with.
Likewise. Hey, I wouldn't be in this spot if it wasn't for you. You know, in our relationship, that's a reality. Like this shit is. It's all super crucial building blocks to where we're both at. So, you know,
and as you were saying, man, it's about just being in the present and trying to just do the right thing and have fun while you're doing it. You know,
always.
That's the key. So
always
appreciate you coming on. We'll do this again,
sir.
Hopefully with Millyz or with Q or Amir, whoever else it is.
Yeah,
we'll make it happen. You already know. We out of here. Peace.